And we're live. What's going on, everybody? Very special impromptu video. I told a few people on social media about it, but everybody on YouTube just found out about it an hour ago. So we are going to be we're going to be debating the original Friday the 13th, probably some details of the sequels as well. Whoa, what's going on here? Hang on. I think my YouTube page is going nuts. There it is. All right. Blooper. But we're going to be debating the original, probably some details of the sequels too, and then the remake. And joining me, I've got Vincent DiSanti, the director of Never Hike Alone, but I'm going to let him intro himself, but I'm sure you guys recognize him. If not, he's going to tell you why you should. So go ahead, Vincent.
Hey, what's up, guys? I'm Vincent DiSanti. Cody, thank you for having me here. Yeah, I am a huge Friday the 13th nerd, and I don't know, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, what was it? We were like, it was a celebration of like when Friday the 13th, 2009 came out. I think it was the 10 year, and everybody started celebrating it. I'm like, what is everybody celebrating for? Like, and we started going back and forth because I'm not a big fan of that film, and you're a big fan of that film. Hey, didn't you rank it as your top favorite one in your list?
Yes, I did.
It's the number one. So it's your number one, and like we started talking like, oh, well, like going back and forth and having a cool discussion about it, and like, to me, which was really fun, is that like part of being a Friday the 13th fan is the debate, because we all have our favorite films and we all have different reasons and we all watched them in different orders and stuff like that. So I mean, like, it's just fun to kind of like debate it. And I'll just like say right off the bat, I don't mean any disrespect to any of the filmmakers involved. Like, I have respect for everybody. I actually really like Platinum Dunes and like most of their films. I really enjoy them, maybe except for Nightmare on Elm Street too. But like, there was no bigger fan of Friday the 13th, 2009 than me. I was convinced they were like, they finally are going to do it. They're going to figure it out. They're going to put together this, like, take this mess, this ball of wires, and present a movie that's kind of like just a eat it up like Friday the 13th. And when they did it, I think my expectations were sorely let down. I think I got my expectations really, really high, and I just didn't. Yeah, and so I didn't enjoy the film. I kind of walked out of the theater scratching my head wondering why. I mean, I love Friday the 13th to death. Like, how did I not like that film? I feel like an idiot. I went back and watched it a second time, and I was just like, what is wrong with this film? And like, over the years, I've watched it over and over again just to kind of like go like, no, I like it. I gotta like it. And I sit down and watch it. I'm just like, I can't finish this movie. Like, I don't want to watch these characters any longer. And yeah, I think we can kind of talk about it. And there's just some nuancy Friday the 13th things that are there. And, you know, and then we can talk about your opinion of the 1980s original.
There you go. See, a lot of the experience that you're talking about is kind of the experience I have with some of the classic originals. Like, whenever I had to review the franchise last year, some of the movies, especially watching them in concession like that, like, it was just like, oh my God, it's the same movie 5-6 times. But I had some of the CP's in the chat. This is gonna be fun. But I had some of the same experience where like you said, like, oh my, I don't want to see these characters anymore. I rewatched the 1980 original, and I watched the remake this afternoon actually, and that was kind of you texted me and you were like, I just want this movie to be over, and you're watching the remake, and I was like, that's exactly how I felt when I was watching the 1980 movie. So we were doing a little kind of throwing jabs back and forth, kind of messing around on Facebook, and Vince was like, hey, let's do this on your channel, and I was like, that's an amazing idea. So that is why we were here.
It's like a live action flame war.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know, it's being good spirits, and it's all over the fun of like, this is what's great about horror movies and things in general, is just being able to discuss it and talk about, you know, I think the discussion here is like, because we're waiting on a Friday the 13th, it's probably good to have this discussion to be like, what do we want to see from a Friday the 13th? You know what I mean? And like, some of the things in 2009 that like, oh, if you would have just, or, you know, things that just were like, don't do this. No more of this, more of this. And then let's get a really good movie out at some point.
Oh man, hopefully. Yeah, we can end on that. That'd be a great great place to kind of close out on, is like what our hopes for the future are. Like, what do we want them to take out of both films and hopefully learn the right lessons from. So we'll open up. We'll just start talking about the original then. So I'll let you go ahead and start if you want to talk about, or actually, you know what, before we even do that, let's talk about like our experience with the franchise, so they can kind of get an idea. I think most people that watch my channel kind of have an idea of mine, but some of my new subscribers might, or ones that haven't seen my Friday the 13th reviews. But talk about kind of your experience, like how far does the fandom go back, maybe your favorite film, your least favorite film in the franchise, kind of set the stage of who you are as a Friday the 13th fan.
I have been a Friday the 13th fan since I was like a little kid. When I started watching horror movies, it wasn't the first thing I watched, but it was one of the first. And it was because I would walk by the horror aisle and I always see the hockey mask. And I was like, this is amazing. And my first ever Friday the 13th was a Jason movie. It wasn't the first one. To sympathize with you, the first time I watched 1980 and I found out it was the mom, I was actually disappointed. Like, I was like, where's Jason? What the hell's going on? I was so confused. But over time, I've grown to really love that film and its simplicity. We'll get into that in a little bit. But I mean, I was a Jason fan through and through. So I watched the hell out of those films. I rented them every time we went, like every time we went to Silver Screen Video, I would rent a Friday the 13th and something else. And it was, I would just keep going up and down the list. And I rented Friday the 13th every week. My mom would look at me like, what is wrong with you? And like, I'm like, nothing. It's Jason. It's awesome. It's scary. And we lived in the woods and I lived on a lake and like, you know, so it was just like, for me as like a kid, it like fueled my imagination. And I just like, it was my boogeyman. And that was what was fun to me. The kills were amazing, all that fun stuff. And, you know, as I got older and I started wanting to get into filmmaking, like my dream goal has always been to work on a Friday the 13th film and be a part of it and like help bring it to life. And instead of doing that, I obviously went and made my own. I made Never Hike Alone, and it has since, you know, done well with the fans and has, you know, been a cool ride for me. Getting to meet so many fans, it's introduced me to so many people around the world and people within the franchise. And it's cool. And it's because I care about, you know, it's because I care about the franchise. I want to see its longevity. I'm like a lot of the fans where I've been waiting on a new movie for 10 years, just like you, like really hard, and watching each iteration go up and go down, like what happened at Platinum Dunes and, you know, all the writers that were brought in for all the different sequels and seeing them all get undercut and getting close. And, you know, it was part of Never Hike Alone's journey where the 2017 film was canceled that January. That was a big event for us because it left the door wide open for Never Hike Alone to step in and really take a center stage. You know, and other fans have now, you know, are taking that up. I think it's like, this is like the rebellion of the fans. It's like, if they won't make the movie, we'll make our own movies. And now there's like 500 of them. And we're all out there just like, you know, trying to entertain the masses while, you know, people are pushing papers around in a room somewhere in Connecticut. And you're like, come on, we're not getting any younger, and let's get this going. And, you know, so I think for me, it's like, it's fun to go back and revisit the films and be like, hey, if we're getting close, let's talk about it and what we love about the series and maybe what the series could use some updating on. So, yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, that's one of the biggest things that I loved about Never Hike Alone, because I really enjoyed it. I've been a big advocate for it. If any of you guys in the chat have not seen it, I'll post a link for it once we get done with this, but you can just search Never Hike Alone. It's for free, available on YouTube. And I really enjoyed it, but the biggest thing for me was exactly what you just touched on. It was like the fans were like, you know what, fuck it, we'll do it ourselves. And I was like, that is awesome. If more people can do that and have the level of quality that you had, that is like a new age as far as I'm concerned. You know, if writers in Hollywood can't get their shit together, then those of us that truly do love the franchise will do it for them. So that's awesome. Yeah, so my stance with the Friday the 13th franchise, it's the only one of like the big 3 slasher franchises that I did not really grow up with. I grew up watching Freddy. I've always been a Freddy fanatic. Grew up watching Chucky. I grew up with the original Halloween, not necessarily the whole franchise, but Friday the 13th was one where I think the first one I saw like full length might have been Jason X. So I know that's, yeah, and that's that. Yeah, I guess see where the laughter comes from with that. But I've seen
it's awesome.
Yeah, I've seen pieces of pretty much most of the original 4 off and on. It was always like on TNT late at night or something where you can, you know, they had to edit out like all but 15 minutes of the movie.
It was on Monster Vision a lot.
Yeah. So I would always see pieces of 1. I've always seen pieces of 4. I always knew 4 was the one with Corey Feldman. I never saw anything from 5 through Jason Goes to Hell until I personally sought them out. But I didn't watch the entire franchise start to finish until like 2 years ago. So I'm a very new, casual Friday the 13th fan. If I ignore the remake, the final chapter is my favorite of like the classic ones. I think that one nails most of what I would want from a Friday the 13th movie. I really enjoy 3 for Richard Brooker. I like elements of 2, although I don't really care for the sackhead Jason too much. The first one, there's things about it that we'll get into, but the thing that always drew me to that one was the joke that they play in the original Scream, where I never realized that Jason wasn't the killer in the first movie. So that was one. That was one where I was like, oh, really? I want to see the one where Jason's not the killer and see how this plays out. But so yeah, I'm a very new Friday the 13th fan. I saw the 2009 remake in theaters when the big remake craze was going on. I liked it in theaters. I wasn't as high on it as I am nowadays because I hadn't really seen most of the other films when I went to go see it. So when I went to go see it, I kind of was scratching my head with some of the things that I'm sure you're probably going to dive into. Like, well, if she's killing everybody, why is Jason standing there watching? Like, there's weird little details that didn't quite make sense to me. But as I've kind of watched the entire franchise, when I went through, kind of analyzed them, when I reviewed all of them, the 2009 one seems to hit most of the beats that I want from a Friday the 13th movie. So that's where I kind of gained my stance with that one. But without further ado, I guess we'll start talking about Friday the 13th, 1980. If you want to talk about like the first time you saw it or some of your experiences with it, or if you just want to dive right into kind of the good and the bad and some of the legacy of what that movie's brought us.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Friday, I mean, obviously it's the staple in the franchise. And in fact, but I rarely meet people who think it's their favorite. The first one is very rarely someone's absolute favorite. That's why when they were doing the press tour for 2009 and all the actors are going, which one do you like? I love the first one. I was like, you're not a Friday the 13th fan.
That's the crazy thing. Just to interject for a second. I've said it before. That's the crazy thing about the Friday the 13th franchise. It's like the only horror franchise where the first one is not like the god. You know, most of them, it's like when I do my Nightmare on Elm Street ranking and I put Dream Warriors above the original, everybody's like, sacrilege, what the hell? It's the original. You do the Friday the 13th ranking. I have never seen anybody with the Friday the 13th or 1980, even in the top 2.
Really? It's consistently top 5.
Yeah.
You know, it's up there. I mean, the thing is that what I love about 2009, well, I guess I do love some things about it. We'll talk about it later. 1980. The thing I love about it is the simplicity of it, and it's the staple movie of the 80s slasher. I mean, like Halloween was there, and there was Black Christmas, and there was Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but the one that was repeated the most was Friday the 13th, and that movie launched everything because of what it was. It was a $500,000 or $750,000 project that literally the guys who were going to make it were either going to put the money in a shopping mall or Friday the 13th. And that's like, it's kind of funny because it's your Hollywood dream story. You make a low budget movie, you put it in the theater, it's high budget success. I mean, that movie made so much money. It made 11 more films, you know, that came after it. And because at the time and how it was made during that time, during the, you know, Sean Cunningham, the producer, Last House on the Left, a lot of those grungy types of films that borrowed from Giallo and just like the really like smutty 70s sleazy slasher films, like kind of stuff, it kind of melded it all together into one little ball. And it's, when you go back and look at it, and as I got older and I rewatched it, and especially when I was making Never Hike Alone and I was going to look back for reference, and I kind of went through the film with a new brain, and I realized how well written it is and how simple it is. And I like the characters. Every scene has a purpose, maybe except for one. And the kills are amazing. You know, that's some of the best work that Tom Savini has done. And the kills are interesting, and it's not the most cinematic thing in the world. That was not the strong suit of the series, was not camera work. Maybe Steve Miner did some stuff. Steve Miner came in 2 and 3, and he really started to push camera. Zito did the same thing, really good with camera. The first one's not, it's shot very small budget, and there's nothing fancy going on. And there's a little bit of steady cam. There's a lot of shots on stick, so it's not really wowing you, but the setting's beautiful, and the camp is beautiful, and the look is amazing. I think it blows 2009 out of the water in just the fact of like set design. I mean, it's like, 2009 has all its frills and stuff like that, but 1980 is the setting is so irreplaceable. No, even though I love different films, my favorite's Part 6. None has had that setting as that first movie, and it's like that's what I think I tried to do in Never Hike Alone, was go back to that camp, something that felt, I don't know, it was just presented in a very specific way, and then that film does it. And then just the fact that like it's the reveal, the whodunit, it ends up being the mom. That final fight scene is ridiculous, and she gets the head cut off. It's just it's a crazy ass movie, especially made for $750,000. So I think that, like, looking at it in context, it's why I think I'm almost so forgiving of its shortcomings in that sense. So,
gotcha.
So let's hear it.
All right, so I kind of actually I'm gonna cheat a little bit. I made myself some notes so I can make sure and not miss any details. So I had some pros and some cons. So the main thing, this I think anybody will agree is the main thing, not only the draw for the movie, but the main thing with its legacy and the main thing that you go to see to rewatch it for, and that's the kills. The kills are really good. Tom Savini's awesome. I like his work in there, and I probably even more in the final chapter. That's one of the biggest reasons why that is probably my favorite of like the classic era. But yeah, the kills are great. You got the arrow through the neck, you got the axe to the face, and it does kind of. It's no secret that they saw the success of the original Halloween and said we got to do this shit. But whenever they did it, it was like they brought it, they cranked it up to 11 with the kills, because Halloween is not like a bloody film by any means. So you get to Friday the 13th, and it's kind of like the opposite side of the coin. We're going to go for the gore, we're going to go for the shock value and everything like that. So a lot of the kills, despite the low budget and everything like that, still hold up pretty well. Betsy Palmer, I think, is great in the movie. It's kind of funny hearing some of the stories about what she thought of the script and what she thought of the movie. So she's kind of embraced it over time, but for a long time there, she wasn't the biggest fan of it. But I think that I'm one of the few that would actually argue the way that she performs, in some ways, she's almost scarier than Jason. She's so mentally unhinged and everything that reveal at the end in the last like 15 minutes where she's full front, the killer. It's good. It's well utilized. I think she's an interesting character. I would not be opposed whatsoever if they were to revisit that character at some point. I think that's hard to not have Jason in a Friday the 13th movie nowadays, but if they ever wanted to do some experimental thing and put Betsy Palmer or put the Pamela Voorhees in a movie, I would be for it because it's a really interesting character.
I think that, there's a lot there.
Yeah. And there's a lot there's more juice in that lemon that they could squeeze out if they wanted to.
And that's what we can kind of talk about later, is like you're talking about something that I think the franchise needs, which is longevity. It's not just them thinking about one film, it's them thinking about 3 films, getting ready to do a new franchise. And that's what I think we really wanted. And I think that's my ultimate letdown with 2009 is the fact that I was hoping here was it going to be, we're going to regenerate the franchise. And now we're going to start doing the movies in succession again. And it left me thinking like, where do they go from here? Like they left themselves no wiggle room at all, and we'll talk about that later. But the Betsy thing, like her performance, it's amazing, and the fact that you could do a story about Pamela, I think now's the time to do it. I think if anyone would be for it, I think horror fans today would be like, yeah, give us a Betsy movie, especially if they know that like there's also a Jason coming, there's other stuff coming. So I definitely pay to see a Pamela remake.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like if somebody like Blumhouse could get a hold of it and they could give us like a 2 or 3 movie like pitch, like all right, it's going to be a year. Like you could say nowadays it doesn't need to be a yearly thing, but it was a yearly thing up until what, part 6. So it you could do it again. You have like somebody like Blumhouse or a company like that could give us like a timeline. Okay, like this first movie, and we read everything nowadays. It's not like it would be a secret. We would know every detail of the production. We would know everybody that's cast. So this first movie is going to be a Pamela chapter. By the end of it, you'll see Jason, and then we're going to go on. It'll be a Jason movie, and then they could do it nowadays. I think they could. They could do like a
mini series on Netflix, like a 6-season, like a 6-episode mini series of like, if you knew you were getting 6 Friday the 13th movies in one day, one of them better be about Pamela. You know what I mean? Like, let's do it. Like, I think they explore everything. I think that's kind of the fun of Friday the 13th is that there's so many threads that each of the films throw out that it's tough to like, if you follow one film's thread, you can follow it down a completely different path with completely different characters, completely different tone. It's crazy. I mean, Friday the 13th is one of the only franchises that just like throws like each movie, like all the rules out the window. It doesn't matter. It just comes back. It's just whatever. And I think, I was kind of hoping that like the new one would, when 2009 came out, that it would be like, okay, just give me some answers. Like, give me some really cool on-screen answers. I want to see it. And I don't feel like I got that. But
oh no, we did not at all. I'll admit that fully. So that was one of the biggest things when I saw it originally, and I still wasn't really quite into the Friday the 13th thing. I was like, that doesn't make any fucking sense. There's big holes there that explain this. And even after you watch the original 3 or 4, and you're like, wait a minute, they just totally skip over that logic in 2, don't they? Oh, they just skip over that logic completely in 3. They're like, continuity, fuck it, you're here for the kills.
Oh yeah, but, continuity in the series is his biggest issue. It's like nothing's like he changes within hours of himself. Like it's ridiculous. But continue on about like I don't think you got into like the dislikes of about where
I still have some pros. I still have some pros.
Yeah, keep them coming.
I like the musical score in the original, and they recycle it quite a few times. But it's simple, like you said, simplicity. But I like it. Whenever you hear that, I think a lot of it came from whenever I was playing the Friday the 13th game for a while, because that score is very heavy in the game. So every time I watch the movie, for whatever reason, it's like it puts me back in the mindset of the game, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of it. It's just weird, but I like the feel, especially towards the third act when it's like the thunderstorm and everything starts to get really dark. It does have a good feeling of isolation, even though you're in this setting where you're in the woods. I mean, you could, if you wanted to run away, you could probably run away and hide successfully if you wanted to. But the way that it's kind of shot, the way that the thunderstorm and the way everything just feels so desolate, it has a little feel of isolation to it, which is cool. And then, of course, the legacy. There's aspects of this movie, which I'll get into, which kind of, it surprises me that it spawned such a gigantic franchise. But there's no arguing that, you know, despite its faults, the 1980 Friday the 13th created one of the biggest, arguably the biggest slasher franchise ever. So got to give it its props for that, regardless what my thoughts are. But as far as negatives, and yes, these are some of them are kind of easy shots. It's a low budget film, but like it's got a cheap look and a cheap feel to it. You watch it and it doesn't age the best. I think the more that the film kind of goes on, it's like, oh man, that was rough. Even the production, you say the production value, which we'll get into that with the 2009. You could tell it's low budget. I mean, it's very, it has a very cheap feel.
But the camp, like I was more saying, like the camp itself, like the camp they shot in Novi Bosco is like, it was just a really nice setting. And I think that was its greatest strength in the production design department.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. The story, what story? You know, kind of with the original, it's I like the whole urban legend thing. Like they open it up with like, you know, there was this 2 people killed, and then now years later they're trying to open up this camp, and then you got, you know, it's got a death curse. You got that guy, and the whole town kind of has this taboo thing with the camp, and I like that. I like that it's kind of this cursed taboo thing that you're kind of tapping into that you shouldn't be tapping into, and they find out why, because Betsy Palmer ain't playing that shit. The pacing is a little bit rough, just because it being that it's a whodunit, being that it's a POV, I feel like the shtick of, you know, waiting for the kill to happen kind of slows the movie down to a creep a little bit here and there. The movies don't really have a whodunit aspect outside of this first. The second one does kind of, but you know who the killer. Okay, well, touche. Touche.
Part 5 is the true sequel to the original.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. I mean, but even going along with that whodunit, like if you're going to focus on being a whodunit, it's fine. But it totally abandons, like kind of like you said, they throw out the rules with every movie. It abandons the rules of the whodunit, and the reveal is somebody we were never introduced to. So when when Betsy Palmer shows up as Pamela Voorhees, despite how awesome it is from then to the end, and from how cool and how interesting her character is, we never got to take part in any of that mystery. Like usually the whodunit thing is kind of the small aspect of it, at least, is trying to figure out who the killer is. Is it this guy? Is it the one that brought them all to the camp? Is it the crazy religious guy? Who's the killer? And then it's just this
random lady who shows up.
Exactly. So it's a weird thing, especially when you watch it for the first time and it's not 1980.
And Betsy Palmer isn't like huge, like a huge TV, like a huge movie star.
So
I mean, TV. I mean, that's the reason why it worked, was because Betsy Palmer was actually a recognized face. She was a lot like what's her face, Janet Leigh from Psycho. It was like when they put her in Psycho, it was because they wanted to draw the audience, and when they kill her in the first act, that is kind of the big shock, because you would think the film is about her, and then you're just left wondering, well, where does it go from here? And I think that, like, in a similar fashion, they bring in Betsy Palmer, because when she shows up, everybody knows her as like the lovable Betsy Palmer, who she would never kill anybody. And then she flips the script, and you realize who she is, and you remember the story that they told, like, you know, about the kid who drowned, and like but it's literally just a one line, like, there's a kid who drowned there, you know. So I mean, you talk about like the the towns. Like I really like the townsfolk in the one. I like the way they're presented. Like they're in a group on the bar and they're all looking down the bar, and like they're all like.
It's like they know some shit's going down, but they don't want to recognize it. Yeah.
But that town feels like a place that you'd find. I mean, like I'm sure nowadays because like it's life is much different. But back then, that was like really recognizable as like the center of town. You know what I mean? And I think that that's one thing that the film does is it actually feels like a real place and a real story. Where I feel where we'll get into 2009 is that. It doesn't feel like a real place. I feel like I'm in a movie. I feel like I'm on the ride. I can see the walls and I can see the smoke machines, and I'm like, like I don't know, we'll get it. Because we can't get to that yet. But yeah, no. So I think that they ground the film pretty well.
Yeah,
that's funny. But yeah, but that's
I can agree. It feels real. That might have to do with one of the advantages of kind of a cheap production is that. Doesn't really have a choice but to feel real because they don't have a whole lot to put into making it feel fake. And then you were talking a bit about the characters. That's the only other con that I have is that I always struggle with the characters of the original. I think Alice is one of the worst final girls in any movie I've seen. I really don't. There's no qualities about her that really stand out to me. And to be honest with you, I just rewatched the movie. What time? So about 5 hours ago. I can't tell you any of the characters' names except for Alice, nor can I tell you anything about them aside from how they died. So I mean, it's just one of those things where I don't know if it's just I don't latch into that side of the story, or if it's just a genuine thing where they just don't really focus on character development. But the characters in the first movie, not necessarily all the classic movies. Like I think Final Chapter has some of the best characters. I really like. I believe it's Ginny in the second movie. Is it Ginny? Yeah, I like her a lot. The third movie, there's a couple of characters that I kind of like. Will remember Sydney and a couple of others that are pretty memorable. The first movie to me, it's more the character side of things are a lot more bland. And again, maybe that's just because watching it kind of later on in life, it's just like, man, these are kind of strange characters. You get this guy with the short shorts, and hey, Kevin Bacon, oh, he's dead. It's a movie I never really remember much about. Character-wise, aside from Betsy Palmer, and then just the fact that I know that the girl's name is Alice at the end, but there's not really anything I can tell you about her aside from she survives to the end.
I think what I like about the characters is that they each have like their little moments, like Marcy when she's in the shower and she's like, "You'll always be ugly," and like it just feels like I don't know. It's like getting to know them, and like they each have their own like little quirks, and you see where they fit, together in certain ways. Like I like when she tells the story on the dock about it raining blood and like having this vision of blood, and it's just like those are kind of like scenes you don't see in movies anymore. It's really like of early past films. They don't do it a lot anymore, but it's like. I don't know. There are certain scenes in there that are just really well written, and they're very simple. I think it's like they're trying to reopen the camp. You see them they're always working on something. Nothing's really going on. The Bill character is pretty funny, running around, messing with the cop, and just being a jokester. And you have Crazy Ralph, wandering around, and then this person watching, you're wondering who it is. And I think what really sets it apart is the individual taking out of each character. And so so when you said that wasn't something that you liked, I was like, now I understand why you like 2009, because they don't do that at all. It's very much this. It's just go out and get him, and Jason's on screen the whole time, and he never gets off the goddamn screen, and he's always running around. And he's in full view for most of the film, which I think is one of the things that hurts it. I think that like there were classic elements that could have been brought in even in that style of production that would have. Like held on to that reveal a little bit longer. I'm not crazy about the look for Jason in that film either. But yeah, in the original, it was like that's each little character went on its little adventure and got killed. And then, I'll give Alice some props. She had to do a lot with a little. Like I can't imagine how hard it was to act the scene where she's like tying the rope to the door and like just jamming stuff. I just feel like God, that looks so
funny. It was so funny to watch today, and I was like, I never really clued in on this scene, but this is like 3 straight minutes of her just finding shit to put in the door, and then she pulls something off and puts something else there.
But I want to swear the door opens in too. So when she's like roping it, I'm like, isn't it going to just push in?
Yeah. I need to rewatch it just for that
So
scene.
I think that might be a gaffe. I don't know. It might open out, but I'm just wondering. I'm like, well, if you're putting stuff in front of the door, you wouldn't want it to open in, but if you tied it, you wouldn't want it to open out. So does it go both ways? Like, what's going on here? It's one of the things I noticed. But it's like it's supposed to be she's in such a panic. You know, it really relies on like, but the thing that it does is it isolates the characters, and I think that that's what makes it enjoyable for me is that like the characters are isolated, and you wonder if they're going to make it out, and then that repeats, and so it's. And when we're talking about like comparing Friday the 13th, the original, we're hindering because 2009 is a remake of the first 4 films. I mean, the entire story itself is a remake of basically the side story in part 4 of Rob Dreyer looking for his sister. That's basically the main storyline of 2009, which is actually a really good story to follow. Somebody going into camp looking for somebody who went missing. It just because it has to serve the Friday the 13th formula, it just keeps like the movie doesn't know where it wants to go half the time. And I think that's, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, so that's kind of where I get in and out of the movie. I just get bored sometimes watching it.
I hear you. Well, we can transition right into it then, because that's pretty much for the most part. There was another thing I was going to laugh about too, because when she's doing the thing with the door, the other logic issue that I had, which you said she's in a panic, which makes sense, is she's doing all this work to keep the killer out. And then she sees headlights and she's like, oh, the killer doesn't know how to drive. I'm just going to run out and see who this person is. And I'm like, yeah. Killer, what the hell? But yeah, so
yeah,
so go ahead.
That was definitely some, I think that was some scene filler. I think it was like, hey, we're running a little short on time. Let's,
well, yeah, and we'll get into
keep rolling.
When I start talking about some of the defenses for 2009, we'll get into that word filler a bit. But so we'll transition into the 2009 too, and I'll let you start with this one as well. So 2009 hits. We're in the middle of the remake craze. Texas Chainsaw Massacre came out. I'm a big fan of that one. I don't know if you are or not, but that kind of rejuvenated this, classic franchise remake craze. We got, I believe, Amityville Horror also came out. And then everybody's asking, where's Jason? Where's Freddy? And Jason comes along first in 2009. The same director. What the hell's his name? It's escaping me.
Marcus Nispel.
Marcus Nispel, yeah. So he did the Texas Chainsaw remake, and then they hired him to do the Friday the 13th remake. I was not aware of it, but you had shown me some articles with the cinematographer that showed that maybe he was not really the biggest Friday the 13th fan, took it for a paycheck. Well, we can get into all that, but 2009 hit me.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I talked about it a little before. I watched 2009 in the theater. I watched out kind of bummed, not wondering why. Going back, watching it again. Then when it came out on home video, like watching it and trying to be like, what am I missing? And we should also just say that preference this, but now we've watched the killer cut today. We both watched, and that's not the version that went into the theaters. And the version that went into theaters is far inferior to the killer cut. I will say that. I watched the killer cut again for the first time in a long time, and like there were like you can see where they lumped out certain elements of the movie that are really cool, and then other elements of the movie just seem to either serve a scene just for the purpose of serving the scene. It doesn't really service the whole movie, and it doesn't have to. It's like it kept. I feel like for me, my biggest gripe with the Friday the 13th 2009 is that it had a lot of great opportunities and always seemed to take like the lowest option or the easiest option or the simplest option, and it never really got going for me. There are moments where I think it finally, here comes the film that I think it's going to be, and it's just then the movie stops again. And I feel like pacing is a big issue of the film. And like you, I made a list of notes. Like I was literally just like live tweeting myself. So I was like, and I don't know, maybe we'll just kind of step through it. First of all, the movie starts off with that red logo, and it's actually pretty cool. Like, so they start off, I mean, if the movie starts off pretty good.
The first 20 minutes are fucking incredible. Like, even despite all of your thoughts for the film, like if that first 20 minutes was its own isolated movie, I think that's one of the best Friday the 13th anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they would have made it all about them going, if you would have started that story a little bit earlier, like you could have done the opening. I'm not a big, well, let's talk about the opening, because it's a recreation of what we just talked about, Friday the 13th. I mean, the remake of 1980 is the first 2 minutes of the movie, and then that's it. And so this is where my nerddom comes in, because I started calculating things in my head and wondering what was going on. And in the original, like, it's just from the standpoint that the scene is super dark. It was really tough to see what was going on. Some of the things make no sense, and this is going to be my mind. Like, there's going to be these little jabs that I do the whole time, and I'm sorry, but this is just me. I don't get that machete. It's like 10 feet long. Where did that come from? What is that being used for? And it was like the first moment where like it didn't feel real. It felt like I was in a cartoon. Like I was like, why did that thing's like it didn't look like they should have just used the original machete. It's perfectly fine. The black grip, like 20-inch machete, it's perfectly good for killing people. Jason doesn't need a 15-foot machete in this movie. And the reason why this girl's dragging it around, or how even Mrs. Voorhees is dragging this thing around, I have no clue. But even the girl is dragging it behind her as she's running. She can't even like hold it up. And I'm like, what is going on? So then you have the girl from Star Trek who hops out and she's like, you should have watched them. And like kind of trying to do the Betsy Palmer, and it's not Betsy Palmer. And I think she's a fantastic actress. I just don't think that this scene is like, to me, it was just like, oh, like I feel dirty. I feel like I'm cheating on Pamela, like I'm cheating on Betsy with this scene. And then there's little boy Jason watching from the forest, and that's my first big tick because he died in 1957.
That's yeah.
What is he doing in the woods as a young child?
I don't know.
And so it makes me, it goes, wait, what story is this following? Did he just drown and not drown? So Mrs. Voorhees is killing people and she really shouldn't be killing people because Jason is still alive. That makes him the dick. You know what I mean? Like he could have ran out that point and went, Ma, I'm good. Like what was stopping him? I don't get it. You know, and so that.
I don't have any defense for that. I'll kind of, I think for this one, because we're probably going to have a lot more points to debate with 2009. We'll kind of chime back and forth. But the opening, I like on paper the idea of kind of cliff noting the first movie because they want to get to Jason. You know what I mean? Like I've said, I think that we can do a Pamela movie. I don't think that in 2009 a Pamela movie necessarily would have worked, but I like the idea of just kind of getting to the point. Like, okay, we're going to get to this. She died. We're going to show it, and then we're going to start with Jason because everybody wants to see Jason. But yeah, it does feel a little bit parody the way that they kind of do the Betsy Palmer. The way that she delivers certain lines, I can totally understand that. It doesn't bug me as much as it probably bugs somebody that's a huge fan of the original, but I definitely can acknowledge it. But yeah, the 4-year-old Jason watching from the bushes, that's the part that I'd never understand. Like it feels like we were kind of talking about this whenever we were.
And that wasn't in the theatrical version. That was one of the things that was cut out because I think they realized like, wait, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, exactly. It should.
And so I think this is a prime example of kind of what I talked about before, serving the scene versus serving the story. And I feel like what Friday the 13th does, it's like 2009 is like in the context of the scene, it's actually like a concept, a little boy Jason watching the thing. And like, if you don't think about how it connects to anything, you get it. I mean, it's a really easy dynamic, but when you put it in like people who know about Friday the 13th, that wouldn't make sense because he wouldn't be a boy. And then even going forward, so it's like, you have to, I guess, change. You have to change. So, he didn't drown. She just killed them all the same year. I guess that could work, but they don't give you any additional screen language to like understand that.
Yeah. So it goes against the established lore without explaining it. Exactly. And yeah, and then just the whole thing, like, everybody always has that question about how the hell did Jason show up in part 2 if she's supposed to be dead? Like, is she just whacked out of her head and she assumed he drowned when he was actually fine? And, it was like I think CP is talking about, it's like an American Psycho thing going on, or what the deal is. Did he just live and couldn't find his mom? But this movie kind of, this is a point where I will agree with you, where it had the opportunity to bridge that gap and give us an actual story reason of why this makes sense. They don't, and they push it to the forefront.
Well, they wanted to. I mean, they very much went after. They wanted the part 2 to 4 feel for that.
Yeah.
And and very much that version is basically, they don't really ever say it out loud, but the assumption is that Jason didn't really drown and he saw his mother die that night. Which I think is one of the franchise's biggest weaknesses because it doesn't make any sense. It completely goes against it kind of negates like Pamela's story because like her son actually died. So like there was sympathy for her and that really drove her. For them to like be separated for over 20 years for no reason, it just seems like a waste of time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of just the way I see it. It's like you have a chance to, come back and be with your mom. Why, if you're so inseparable, why is he living in the woods all that time? So it kind of just makes me think about like, no, this isn't the best way to, that's why I think it's like he died and he came back. And so if they would have done something where she died on the beach and then he rose out of the friggin' lake, I'm in on this movie. Like, here's the Jason that I think for many Jason fans, obviously I'm a Jason Lives fan. So him in part 7, him rising out of the lake is kind of like That's the Jason we want to see. The backwoods hillbilly Jason doesn't make a lot of sense, and it doesn't offer a lot of expansion because he's expendable. He will not survive. I mean, he can survive some stuff, and we'll talk about what he survives at the end of this film, which doesn't make any sense. And that's one of the things. It's like they tried to ground Jason and then they ungrounded him at the end, and it felt like the same mistakes of the past. Like, oh well, if you liked it back then, you just like it now. Eat it up, dummy. Like, it's like, no, like, come on, like, do something like smart. Like, let's be smart here. So let's jump into my next topic. Would be the score, which is not. Is there a score? Is there music in this film? Because I have trouble hearing it. All I hear is a bunch of like boom, 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 and I'm like, am I at a rave? And that the score of like, it really bugs the hell out of me because it needs to be a string score. What are you making a Friday the 13th and you don't have strings? And then I really don't like the needle drop music. Their soundtrack is something to be desired. And like the moments when like they're showing boobs, it goes into like this creepy porno music, and it's like wow, 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 and I'm like, this is so cheeseball. Like, what is this? This is not like, I got down. I was like, I wanted a higher class of film. I like, for all its faults, Halloween 2018, at least it remains a pretty classy film. Like it does have some stuff that it goes lowbrow, but like,
what are you talking about? That movie doesn't have any faults.
another time. Yeah, another time. But it was like, I think that it obviously fared better than Friday the 13th. They're going to make a second one. So, which this, they didn't make one for 2009. They couldn't get a thing made, and they had 10 years to develop another one. And there was no true, like, this is the way we're bringing the franchise. It was always like, it seemed like they were always one-offs again. And, I don't think anyone really had like the formula to like, how do we bring it back to the franchise model? So the music. So what do you think about the music?
I have no thoughts, so I'm probably going to have to agree with you because I don't really. It's something I didn't hone in on, so it probably wasn't memorable enough for me to make a negative or a positive out of.
So all right, so jumping into the next big thing then is the characters. I find a lot of the characters
the one where I get the biggest debates with. So this is cool.
They're really, really douchey. I mean, like from like Trent and Clay's bro offs, which are really awkward to watch. I'm like, why don't you two just kiss? Like, why don't you guys just make out like just right now? I mean, like, bruh. And every time they get, I'm just like, oh, this is so. And like the dialogue a lot of the times feels like so throwaway. Like the kid gets out of the car and goes, oh, I got to try and sell my label. What kid do you know is like on a weekend trip selling his label? I'm like, who are these kids?
Yeah,
who are these people?
They're a strange group. I will tell you that. As far as like, I don't believe that they would be friends. I'll just put that. Like, I like them as individual characters for the most part. The character with the label, and it has nothing to do with him being black. Let me go ahead and say that because I know somebody's going to put it out there. But it's his dialogue, and it's because he makes the racial jokes like 2 or 3 times before the movie even gets like half an hour in. He's like, "Why are you going to go racial? It's not rap." And what you doing? I'm doing rap.
Yeah, that was one of the things I wrote down. It's like, I just felt like it's not like. I'm sorry. I don't like it, but I just didn't find the film is based on a lot of jokes, and I feel like the jokes keep coming and none of them are really that strong. There's a couple of times I laughed. There's a couple of times that like, okay, that was good, but I feel like there's so much of it and they're never it's just not fun to watch. I'm just like, I feel like I'm just waiting, and so a lot of the dialogue's really off. Like I wrote like as I was going to like Lawrence and Chewie, like it's just everything is just like he gets out of the back of the thing and he's like, oh, it's like being an ovaries or something, and I'm just like, It's
that kind of turn of the century humor that doesn't quite. It's not the strongest. Like the dialogue is not one of my pros. I'll put that.
And so I think that because like I wasn't really like into the jokes, the comedy didn't carry me. The scenes that were supposed to carry me in between the Jason scenes really didn't help me. And it starts with the first group. I mean, the character of Wade just ruins like almost every scene for me. Like every time he's like, "Hey guys," and everything he says, I'm like, can you breathe? Can you just like, you're going to tell the story of Camp Crystal Lake. Why don't you take a breath? and like get serious, because that's the only way this tale works. It's like when Paul tells it in part 2, when they do the intro in part 7, when they talk, even when John LeMay talks about it in Jason Goes to Hell, it's like there's a certain reverence, and I don't feel that like that scene is like, it's just like, I don't know, in the way it's shot and what they're doing, it doesn't seem like anyone really gives a shit.
I'll agree with that. I actually noticed that when I rewatched it today, was whenever he was kind of cliff noting the legend, it felt exactly that. It felt like somebody handed him a piece of paper and said, read this. So that was something, again, that would be like a nitpick as far as I'm like, when I watched it, I'd be like, yeah, it could have been stronger, but it doesn't really take me out of the movie. I don't think the character takes me out of the movie either. I think it's kind of funny because he's like obviously the fifth wheel in that group. Like, you got the guy and his girlfriend, you got the guy and his girlfriend, and then you got him. And so he's like, he can't shut up because he has nothing else to do. Like, they're going off into the woods because they want to screw and they want to get weed, and he's just kind of tagging along for the ride. Like, hey guys, did you hear about this? And they're like, I don't care.
Even their other scene where he's like, you know, I don't get stressed. You know why? Because rich people don't get stressed. And I'm like, oh, calm down. But it's I think so. For the weed to calm him down. Yeah, no, he needed to smoke that weed. But I think when he's telling, like, when that story happened, like, some of the characters should have actually been scared. Like, they should have been like, should we move? Like, should we get out of here? Nah, don't worry about it. We'll be fine. Like, it's all just bullshit anyway. You know what I mean? But I mean, it has to be scary, and like the music doesn't support it. Again, it's just going boom, 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 boom underneath his little story and like these little hits, and it's like, I'm not scared. Can you scare me? And then, you know, and then they go into the thing, and it starts the first set of kills, and I found the first kill to be very lackluster. Like, it's the beginning of the movie. The first thing they do is show a full torso shot of Jason with the mask on. Now, I do say Jason in the mask, in that part of in that style of the costume, actually works. I think that's when he looks the best in the film, is when he has the sack hat. That's a great improvement on the original potato sack. Dude, I'm with you on that. That's where the film did really, really well. We'll get into the other mask later because I'm not a big fan of it. And all of a sudden, like, Jason starts plodding towards him, and the camera gets really shaky, and the dude falls off camera, and you don't see what happens. And then you cut to the next scene, and you're like, what the fuck just happened? Like, did they drop the camera? Like, what's going on? And then they go into the next part of the scene, and like, that's some place where, like, that was a classic. Like, he shines the light, he sees a set of boots standing above him, then he looks up and a cleaver comes down in his face, and we watch him bleed on the ground. Like, that's Friday the 13th to me. Like, give me that kill. I don't want to see the killer yet. I want to see like an off-screen, like old school, like there's the hand with the machete, or there's something that's right there and he's kind of obscured. Like, don't just shoot him and show him. It's like, can we build? It's like, yo, come on, I want to play. I want some foreplay. Like tease me a little bit. Don't just give me like a full shot right in the face right away, and you're like, what? Like, come on, like, we just got started. Like, come on, ease me into this. And I don't feel like Jason really does that enough in the beginning. He's just like always right there, and he's popping up in full view. He's doing weird things like tying girls to trees and burning them. Like, really, like, that's an awesome kill. It's an awesome kill. Except when they cut into the sleeping bag and it doesn't look real because there are no flames, and it looks really weird, and she's just wiggling around, and then she falls out. And it's like cooking her from the inside because of the heat. Because she's cooking. Yeah, okay. Exactly. Yeah. I just wanted to see the bag go up in flames, and just like they could literally could have stayed on the outside, and I think that would have been more. Every time they cut in, I was just like, but is she? What's wrong? Like, is she just hot? Like, okay. Well, yeah, every time they cut back to her skin is getting more blistered and kind of getting more red and everything. So it's a campfire cooking thing. Not to pull out campfire knowledge on you or anything like that, but it's whenever like something's rotating over flame, even the open flames, it's just it's more the residual heat. So she's just kind of cooking, and then as soon as it actually gets hot enough to do what you were saying, like set the sleeping bag on fire, she's already dead at that point. That's when she falls out. Yeah, but you know, kudos to Jason on his new rope tying skills and his ability to string her up like that. Like, that was actually really impressive. Which is like, I'll let it go because that's what horror movies are for. It's like, I won't question it. And where the scene actually does, because I didn't the execution of the sleeping bag it's cool, but I was like, like, I don't know, I'll nitpick it, but I'll leave it alone for now. But the bear trap is actually really cool. I actually really like the bear. That was more the first time. That's the first time the movie and the whole time made me go like, ooh, like, oh, like, and it was like, oh, more of this, please. And that was really good. And then you go to them walking around Camp Crystal Lake, and this is where I have another kind of like just let's think about where Friday the 13th stands and what's going on here. Why does Mrs. Voorhees have a whole house out there that's decrepit? Like, if her son died, why is she living there, or why was she living there if it was, again, 1957? And like, is that really?
I have to assume that in this version of the story, and it's their fault for not spelling this out, the fact that we even have to debate it is a fault on them. But I have to assume that the Jason that we saw in the intro, like, that was all the same day. Like, he supposedly died that day, but he survived, and then she went nuts and fucking killed everybody. And then he shows up at the end, which you said he's kind of the dick because he's just kind of like watching, like, hey, what's mom doing? And then she gets killed. But
I mean, he had to be around all day, or was he like lost in the woods, or like what was going on? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, because all the little weird details, like the beginning, the bed with the Jason engraved on everything, makes absolutely no sense if you assume the story is identical to the 1980 and he's been dead for so many years and everything. So that's the only way that you can make sense of some of those things, is saying that, okay, the prologue all happened in the same day. But again, like I said, if they didn't spell it out, then it's kind of a moot point, because we're assuming.
And it's like, yeah, I think part of it too is that as these characters are walking through the scene, they're like describing what they're doing. They're like, look, a bed. Look, that says Jason. Isn't that the name from the story? And like, you're like, I'm not dumb. I get it. I get what you're trying to do. Like, you don't need to say and show it. Like, just pick one. Like, just pick one. And it's like, for me, I think I always thought of Pamela as like a different story. Like, I didn't think of her as like this established woman who had like this great life at Camp Crystal Lake. It's like, she's this, like, the mother of like a single mother. She's there with, they're not staying there permanently. They don't have time to go engrave names in headboards and things like that. They probably have barely enough money to survive. Like, they have a whole house with like all that crap in it. Like, just didn't seem right to me. But what kind of blew me later on after watching it is, as these two kids are wandering around through the camp, they find two important clues that have no right being where they are. One being the locket just hanging somewhere randomly, when they make such a big deal out of it in the beginning, where he picks up the locket, he picks up his mother's head, and he picks up all that stuff, and he's carrying it back. And later on we find out that he's not living in the house, he's living in the tunnels. So why isn't the head and the locket already down in the tunnel? Why would he leave that out? And it's like they're walking in, he's leaving it in a bathtub for people to find, knowing that, like, I guess people walk there all the time, because many people find it in the movie. It just seems, I don't know. It just seemed like convenient. There's a lot of conveniences where, like, if they were going to have them find something, they should have had them find the layer. You know what I mean? And then we see the real, like, I would, like, later on in the film, in the killer cut, they have that room full of bodies, which you can't have because they can't do the Whitney thing, because they cut out the whole piece of her running to the house, Jason grabbing her, running her all the way back to camp, running all the way back to the house to kill the rest of the kids. That she goes through that sea bodies, but like, that's your place for a head. I mean, if the shrine is anywhere, it's over all the dead bodies that he's presenting to his mother, trying to bring her back. And it's like, it's like, so it just felt like disconnected. It just felt like it was there to service the certain thing, and he just puts it in a hole in the wall, and there's candles around it, and it's kind of cool. But I don't know. It always confused me. It's like, why is that just randomly laying around and not like protected where he's protecting everything? Like, he's got the girl down there. That just didn't make sense to me.
Gotcha. Well, aside from those things, which some of them I can follow, some of them it's I can see the passion of the Friday the 13th fan, because I would do the same thing if it was a Freddy film. I would analyze every single detail and be like, hey man, what's up, bro? That doesn't quite. But I kind of skate past all of that. A lot of the things you're bringing up, I'm kind of like, well, I never even thought of that. So I don't.
Yeah, it's that, and that's the thing. It's like, that's what it relies, and I think the film relies on just being like, just sit back and let it happen. And it's like, we're discovering where that is. But it's like, when you start to think about it, it's like, and that's what it was for me. It was like, when I started to think about it afterwards, like, what was bothering me? I'm like, oh yeah, why wasn't the head in the thing? And why was this there? And it was like, it was to serve that scene. And there are, I don't know, it just felt disconnected in that sense. And then you have like, then you have the part where like the knives are coming up through the floor, and he comes and he pulls the dude down, and he chases after her out. And like, I don't know, by that point, it had been so long. I was just like, oh yeah, this is happening now. And you know, he kills the kid in the bear trap, which is pretty cool kill. We finally see like a real like on-screen piece. And then he swings down and you realize this is only the first 15, 20 minutes of the movie. And in that contained section, yeah, it's actually, you know, there's some good bits, there's some good kills, but it just feels like it's cramming so much in. And now we're starting a completely new story, and the film kind of starts over, and it brings in this new set of characters, and they're even like less likable. And they all seem to be kind of off on their own adventures, and and as the film develops, we get into this weird mentality where like Jason's just killing people for no reason and doing a lot of really weird things for seemingly no reason, when if all he wants to do is just be left alone, and he's smart and he's been surviving out in these woods and being really careful, he wouldn't do a lot of these things. And it kind of makes like the whole world inept, like especially the sheriff. Like this sheriff literally has to be looking the other way on massive bloody crime scenes and being like, well, nothing we can do about it. Guy lives in a tunnel, I can't find him. There's got to be a line of reality of like, okay, like if kids go missing in the woods, it's one thing, but as like the film develops, like Jason really puts a lot on the line for really no reason at all, and I don't understand. And we'll get into that. So,
okay. Yeah, well, let me talk about just the opening.
Yeah.
So I think that whole opening 20 minutes is awesome. Like I already said, I think it's one of the best. Like if that was just a contained Friday the 13th episode or whatever, I think that's damn near like flawless Friday the 13th from what I go for the series for. You talk about it not really being too scary. I'm one that I don't really get scared very easily anyway, so I guess I always had the expectation I'm not going to be scared. But to me, and maybe this is just because I love this version of Jason so much, to me it felt like they were going for scares with their portrayal of Jason. Like this freight train of Jason. This is the dude that runs, that's just going to massacre everybody and just blow through the walls like the Hulk. I mean, and that's kind of what this incarnation of Jason is with Derek Mears. He's my biggest positive for the movie as a whole. And if we ever do get another Friday the 13th, I hope to God that he works on it, even though I'm sure he's not. So yeah, you open it up. I never really had too much of a problem with the character who he's kind of like the fifth wheel, but it's just this when he kind of cliff notes the legend where it feels very written. But I like all the other characters. I like how they kind of go off and leave him, which is why I say that he's kind of the fifth wheel. He's going to be the annoying one anyway, because they're not there to be there with friends. They're there to do their business, and he's the only one that's not going to be getting any. So, so I like all of that. But yeah, as soon as Jason shows up, totally 100% agree. Like the sackhead version of Jason we get in this, far and away better than the sackhead we got in the original part 2. That's actually my least favorite Jason. I don't really care for the look, like just the one eye, and even the portrayal of Jason. He's very clumsy in the second movie. So this movie, the look of it, where it's more like wrapped around his head, and all of the kills, I think. I mean, to get the first one's kind of off-screen kill, so that you could see the aftermath and the hung ear and everything. They could have showed us, and you know they give us everything else in excess. So I don't know why they didn't, but the kills I think are awesome in the first opening. Like I love the bear trap and the sleeping bag kill. I think it's pretty sadistic, and logic about how fast he's able to tie it up. But at the same time,
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
If you're going to Friday logic, you're going to be the wrong frame.
I mean, it is a callback to the snare trap from part 2, which you know they were pulling, and it's like they kind of had the elements. It was like, okay, like I can watch this Jason. And like it wasn't in the first 20 minutes that the movie lost me. It's as the movie progressed on, it becomes this marathon to watch where you're like, oh my God, this is still going. And it never gets to the part of my favorite part of the Friday the 13th. We'll get in that in a second.
Yeah, so I like the scene where they go to the shrine and they find the head and everything. Even though, it would make more sense for it to be in the tunnels since they spend so much time in the tunnels later on. But I love the whole machete coming through the floor. I think it's a very tense scene. I like how the dude, like it feels like they're going to get out of it really quick, and then all of a sudden, as soon as he gets hit once, that's it. Like he just gets hit 3 or 4 different times, and then Jason just plows through the floor and rips him into the floorboards, which again just kind of it's all made to showcase that this Jason ain't fucking around, and it does that. And then you get and I remember when I saw it in the theaters, especially whenever you got to the point where it was just the bear trap guy and Whitney left. I was like, they're killing all these characters quick as hell. This movie just started. Like nobody realizes that this is just an opening, unless you think that where's Jared Padalecki at. But you go and you get the machete to the face, and then she's running away, and then he goes and swings on her, and whoosh, and then you get Friday the 13th. Like the whole effect from the time that the Betsy Palmer Cliff Note thing starts all the way to that title sequence, I just think is the highlight of the movie. And it's the highlight of the movie, but it's also one of the movie's flaws that it kind of blows its load so quick. Because most people, even the biggest critics or the biggest critics of 2009 will say that the movie, that was awesome, but it's after they get to the new set of characters, which you've already kind of alluded to, the movie starts to show its flaws. So it's a shame that the movie like really had a lot going for a lot of people, and then it just kind of gave it all to us in the first 20 minutes. I still am entertained throughout, but I can agree wholeheartedly with anybody that says that the movie's front loaded, because it absolutely is.
I think some of it, I think it could even be more improved if it was a little tighter too. I feel like there's a lot of sitting around with the characters trying really hard to be funny. And like the whole like drink my piss scene, like, and that whole thing with like the boobs back and forth, it just feels like, you know, I'm like, I get it. It's Friday the 13th, but like, do we have to do this for 2 minutes? Like, isn't there like a fun flash you can give us or something a little bit more like there's other ways. There are other, it just felt like very like we're stopping to have these scenes that are very like all full scenes rather than like something that's more craftily cut around like stuff happening at the same time. I feel like I'm jumping from this scene, now I'm cutting to this scene, now I'm cutting back to this scene, rather than things that like are progressing at the same time. I don't know, just kind of a pacing issue for me. But for the most part, yeah, it is the most promising and rewarding part of the movie for sure.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah. Let me see. I'll follow along with your lead as far as if you want to continue down the story, because we're kind of going sequential here. So.
Yeah, so I mean, like I kind of talked about like in the second act, or when it starts like the second round of kids, and not really into anybody. Like it starts off in the scene where they're in the gas station, and it really feels like Texas. I know they shot it in Texas, and like it doesn't feel like Crystal Lake to me. Like of all the places they've taken Crystal Lake, this is one of the places it feels the least like it. The lake's pretty beautiful. They do have some beautiful shots of there, but I feel like that the tin can road sign, like I feel like I'm in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I don't feel like I'm in Friday the 13th, New Jersey, or even like the way, you know, they shoot it up in California and stuff like that. I understand they're going after, that's where they shot, that's where they're from. They made it in their hometown. Good for them. Didn't care for that stuff. But the characters, he's like talking to the dude behind the counter, and he's just really just like a cartoon character, like, but the owner's a real, and like, and then they have that bro down, and everyone's just being really annoying and like saying witty banter, and like no one's really that witty or smart. And
it's so entertaining. This is the biggest thing, like the biggest debates that I'll get into with this movie regards the character of Trent and how things are kind of like his dialogue and his interactions. I don't know. I am so entertained by how much of a dick that guy is. Like
he is a huge dick.
Yeah, he's kind of like when people talk about assholes in horror movies, most of the time they bring him up as like the king, like he holds the douche crown. And,
totally, but he is like the thing that's working. So he's in every scene, and so I get oversaturated with it. I get oversaturated with him in like every scene. It's like, you know, there are like, I think what Friday the 13th used to do is like they have their groups. And they split up time between the groups, and each of the groups gets their own beat. And this time, the group is always on top of each other, all fighting for screen time and doing things and trying to outdo one another. And it's not like it. Oh yeah, you're like, oh Jesus, and so it's kind of like they're clumsily together and that, but it's more about like when things start happening. So like the movie kind of like stumbles through itself, and then we get on with the boat scene. We get our first couple of kills. And you know, we got, you know, what's his face driving around. We got Clay driving around meeting people. And first we get like, so I don't know if you noticed, but on the mailbox it says Claiborne. So I guess that's a little knockoff to Dolores Claiborne. Then he goes to meet the old woman. Now, this is where I start to say like, all right, even though Friday the 13th, 2009 and 1980 are two different budgets and two different times to do this thing, like Crazy Ralph or the Dolores Claiborne lady, which one had the better scene? And I'll go Crazy Ralph 10 out of 10, because that scene of like, you don't go around here, like is in 50 movies. There's only one Crazy Ralph. You know what I mean? There's only one like really iconic. Those scenes are so iconic to the original that when you're going to now recreate those, like you do something that I've seen in like 50 different horror movies. There's no true Crazy Ralph in the film. It's a missing presence, and that was supposed to be somewhat of a Crazy Ralph reference, and it wasn't. And even the cop too, the way he harasses Clay, it just seems really weird that like this cop's like, stop looking around here and blah blah blah. It's like, like you kind of seem like you're more of a hindrance than you are a help, my friend. Like what are you like, you're trying so hard, you can tell that something's wrong, but why haven't you done anything about it? And it's just it just feels very superficial. Like a lot of the relationships just seem superficial. It's very surface level. And when you start to think about like the things the characters are saying and the things that are going on within the context of like, if this is supposed to be in town and stuff like that, it just doesn't feel like a real place. It just feels like a movie set. It feels like movie characters. And that's something that like, I don't know, for me, I have to feel like I'm like watching real people. And I never felt like I was watching real people in the second half. And then it's like, okay, well now it's time to kill them. Let's, part 7, not the greatest cast of characters, but they die off really cool. So that's what makes that film fun to watch. So let's make this a part 7. Let's start killing these people off. When it starts that, it again starts to like tick at my brain. Like, what's Jason doing stealing kerosene in the middle of the day? That does not make any sense. And how come when Jared Padalecki walks up on that guy and he's putting stuff into a tree trimmer, he might want to protect his face with something? What would be a good thing to protect your face with when you're putting stuff in a tree trimmer? Maybe a hockey mask. What a great way to introduce the hockey mask. Like there's like all these and literally, I remember when I was remembering the film back, I thought that's actually what happened. Like that's the memory I had in my head until I saw it a second time. I was like, wait, he's not wearing it. I thought he was, wait, where did he get the mask again? And then do that. And they cut out the scene where he finds the mask prior, goes up, and then Jason just like casually strolls down the stairs like, oh, you caught me. Well, just cut your head off. Like, it was just such a like silly scene. It's like, why don't you make that scene at night and scary and make sense? Like the dude's coming back, it's dark as hell, and now someone's up there because he thinks everybody's gone for the day, and this dude's loading in his weed. Like it just seemed like a very odd time of day for the smart Jason to be stealing stuff and then leaving, like, and then killing somebody and taking them. It's like, at least as dumb as like the Steve Dash version is on screen, at least he was at first, like they came into his territory first. And that's what's good about Jason at the beginning, is that they're in his territory. He has a reason to attack them. He's going to take them out because they're on his land. And everybody else within the rest of the film hasn't done anything to him. They haven't crossed his they haven't messed with him. They haven't uncovered him. If he's just who he is and who he's been in this town, really, he has no excuse to attack anybody in the film. The kids out on the boat, no reason to attack them. They're not at Camp Crystal Lake. They're only going to draw attention when a boat with a dude with an arrow in its head crashes up on the shore somewhere and somebody finds it. I think the cops are going to have to really kind of start like looking into this stuff. And it's like, okay, yeah, it's cool that he got shot with an arrow. It's cool that Jason used a bow and arrow, but couldn't you have had the boat pull up into the camp and be like, oh shit, check this out, and get out and kind of make the camp the place where people go missing? That's the whole point. Like, that's what we want to see. We want to see people go into the camp and go missing, and then Jason have an excuse to come out and kill people. And, in the originals in part 2, it was the reason why he came out. They were encroaching on his land and they were getting close. And then he felt the rage and he had to go out and kill them. And it starts a 3-day killing spree. The reason why he goes to the other houses in the other films is because he's on a killing spree. He's been uncovered and he's going out. In this one, he hasn't been uncovered. He's still secretly hiding, and he's going out and just murdering people at this house just because they happen to be partying. And so it kind of, I don't know. It's just, I know that that's kind of like the staple of a Friday the 13th, but at the same time, it seems like if you're making a smart Jason, then write him a smart Jason and write characters that are going into his land. Because obviously Clay goes in there and starts messing around, but he's already killing people before that. And so it's kind of odd. And then when he shows up at the house, it's also kind of odd. Why did he go there? What's going on? I mean, Trent's family has lived there for generations.
Yeah, that's certainly a logic issue that I was going to bring up. If you didn't bring it up, which I'm sure you would, is that it's. I feel like the scene where Whitney gets to the house kind of introduces him to a threat. I don't know, that may be stretching it, but like the fact that she was trying to get to them makes him feel like he has to take them out, so she has nowhere to go.
There's that, but he kills Chewie before that happens. He kills him in the shed, and then she runs up, and that's the way it's cut. And so it's this odd, and I think, and this is where the film really falls apart. It's by the time you have your individual kill, so you kill individual. Well, you don't. Like, you have a pair that gets killed, and they get killed together. Both of them get killed in the same scene. You have one individual kill where he creeps up behind the dude and ends up slicing his neck. But then after that, where the film makes its biggest mistake is that Jason is now revealed. Whitney and Clay, or no, what Bree? No, not Bree. Bree's the girl with the stupendous
nipple place.
front area. And Jenna. It's Jenna. So Clay and Jenna discover Jason, and they run back to the house and they warn everybody. And now you have a group of people huddling into a house, and you eliminate what makes Friday the 13th the best thing, which is a stalk and slash film. And it makes the character so dumb, because the minute you hear that somebody's running around killing people, why does Juliana Gill's character Bree go off into a bathroom to look for him by herself? That doesn't make any, like, it doesn't make any, like, it's like now it's just being stupid. Now this movie's just being dumb. Whereas, like,
feels like the overarching gripe that you seem to have with it is that the movie, it's like it embraces all of the flaws of the franchise while trying to improve upon them, but not fully going there. Like, it improves on some things, but it just kind of draws attention to the flaws.
Yeah, it kind of shine. It puts a shine on some of the issues that the series has. Yeah. Like, when you're going to go back and remake Friday the 13th, and you're going to go back, you don't look at the flaws, and like, some of them are lovable flaws, and you can tip your cap to them. But to build a film with the flaws is just like, it seemed like, and some fans love it. Like, I'm not here to change anyone's opinion on it. I'm just saying what my gripe is with it. And as a fan, I was robbed of this experience of, like, he could have systematically worked his way from Chewie to Lawrence, who masturbates in the middle of the living room.
Man.
But if you're going to have a masturbate in the middle of a living room, like the kid from part 4 who's watching the porno, kill him in the living room and then have him go kill the cheaters in the thing. And that by the time Clay and Jenna get back to the house, everyone is dead. Boom. That's what happens. It's kind of like what happens with Trish and Rick in part 3. They go off on their journey to go talk about the time that Jason diddled her in the woods. And by the time they come back, everyone's dead. That's how the Friday the 13th part 3 is supposed to work. And they don't. They're like, oh wait, we left all the characters alive by the time the heroes come back with the information that there's a killer on the loose. And the fact that, like, and what if they don't find Camp Crystal Lake in the middle of that? What if they come back searching all day and then find everyone dead and then are chased to Camp Crystal Lake at the end of the movie? It keeps going, back and forth there. So it's kind of like there's some stuff in development when they were writing the script that was like, all right, let's streamline this film, because there's a lot of back and forth. I mean, they're at the camp a ton, but they never discover the tunnel, and then that's kind of like the big reveal. But they show us the tunnel right away. I mean, we see where Jason lives, and when he comes down after he gets the backpack, and why does Jason turn on lights? Isn't that dangerous? Like, if he's turning on the lights at Camp Crystal Lake, isn't no one going like, the lights are on Camp Crystal Lake again? Like, if someone's going to follow the power cord, I mean, like, at some point, like, if he's so damn smart, why is he so damn clumsy? Like, why does he, like, allow all of this to happen and just, like, totally blow his wad on this group of characters? So that happens. Then he comes to the house. But no, it doesn't. So now they're running around, and an actual good comedy part in the film is actually when Trent goes to drive the cop car and it drops onto the hood and he screams like a girl and runs away. There's a scene where, like, Jay, like one, I think the lamest kill in the scene in the film is like when she's up there in the bathroom and she just moves the curtain. I was just like, come on, this is Friday the 13th. We're supposed to be cutting edge. We're supposed to be inventing the new kills and not doing the old kills. Like, this is so old school. And he picks her up and he does the kill from Silent Night, Deadly Night, which Silent Night, Deadly Night did better. Yeah. You know what I mean? Puts her up on like these little like baby antlers. It's like, no, burst through her chest. Like, she's got stupendous boobs, ruin them. Like, come on. Like, that's like, if you're gonna show a gun, shoot it. Like, let's pay it off. Or let's have some brutal kills. And then he shoots her. It's like, you know what? Either have him shoot her and have her die that way, which would be way more traumatic. Why do you have him shooting a dead body, or show her on the thing still kind of alive and then she gets shot? Like, it was just like weird decisions that are happening through these scenes and that everyone's sent running. And so my question for Jared Padalecki or Clay and Jenna in this moment is, now that the cop has shown up and he's been killed and they're all on the run, why are they running back to the camp? They don't know that Whitney's alive. They haven't seen her. I mean, with everything that they've seen, odds are she's dead. He's been killing people left and right. Odds are that they have no clue that she looks like his mother. Like, they don't have that information. So for them to run back to the camp and be like, "Oh, I need to go here," it's kind of like, why wouldn't you run back into town and go get a lot of people to go look in there? Wouldn't that, okay, I guess I'm just going to have to go along for this ride. And like, again, I just feel like the movie's like being like, "Shut up, dummy. Like, just keep watching." And it gets there. And so, they go down, they free Whitney. And then, Jenna, and actually, you know what? And so the first time I actually cared that a character dies in the film is when Jenna gets it. I actually felt it again today. I was actually like, oh.
That's a great moment because you really do not expect it. For a movie where everybody's expected to die, that is a great scene because not only is she a really good character, although I always had the confusion if she's actually dating Trent or not. I never can quite tell if she's just one of the people there or if they're boyfriend and girlfriend, because she's not a very good girlfriend, nor is he a good boyfriend. But
no, they're an awful couple. I think it's like kind of like they maybe started dating. He started flirting. He invited her out, invited her friends. "Why don't you and your friends come to my cabin for the weekend?" He's going to use it to get laid. And so he's trying to use his moves. And she's kind of like, "I don't know about this guy. Is her intentions real?" And then she sees how much of a douche he is to Clay. And so she starts going around because, Jared Padalecki has those dimples and a motorcycle.
Yeah.
The other thing too, it's like, she like makes fun of his motorcycle, but it's actually a really nice bike. like, "Oh, that thing runs? Yeah, you have that brand new Indian? Yeah, it's pretty nice." Or like, I think it's a Triumph. It's like, it's actually a really nice bike. Like, there's just
Let me ask you, before you continue, the whole this is one of the biggest criticisms I hear for the film, which I'm a big defender of. What is your stance on Jason taking a hostage?
Let's two-prong this one too, because the other one is the tunnels, like him living in the tunnels. But the hostage doesn't make sense to me. It's kind of like, I'd rather it be like Congo and she's just dead. They traveled all that way and she's dead. And I think that would have been a much more interesting story. And I think that if they would have slowed their pace, and I think if they would have concentrated more on Clay and not gave so much to the comedy clan, if it was more about their story and everything else went to the wayside and they dropped the jokes and they kind of like just let that film breathe a little bit and kind of pay attention to that and give him more to do, and then it becomes the discovery of the camp. You know what I mean? Like, you're discovering those things with them, and then he discovers the dead bodies, and then they go back to the camp because they need to, they think they need to go wherever it is or find him or whatever, or they get chased back that way and they end up in the tunnels. I don't know. It didn't really bother me. It wasn't what bothered me about the film. I kind of got it, but I also thought that like it plays into the end of the film where she starts doing the Ginny shtick, and it doesn't feel right again. Like, I just feel like you're only doing this because they did this before, but there's no reason why the character should think that she can control Jason. Like, Ginny does it because she's a child psychologist. Like, that's what she's studying to do. So she says out loud in the film that she thinks that he's just a giant man baby. And so that's how she, you can see her cleverly plan it. And Whitney just kind of like goes like, "Jason, it's okay," and tries to like hold on to him. And then I think that like, and it's part of like what I find issue with the film. So now you have Clay and Whitney now on the run from Jason. Jason, who's just stabbed Jenna, now puts his machete away so he can bare hand Jared Padalecki. What, again, smart Jason? Why are you using your bare hands on the bigger dude who could fight back? And he kicks his ass. Granted, he smashes his face a couple times, but I think that was a good chance for the film to finally be a one-on-one battle. And it is for a minute. Whitney kicks him in the face, kicks him down the hole, crawls away. That's kind of a good scene, but it needed to continue. But instead, Jared Padalecki gets back up, and it's again the two-prong run into the farm where it starts to concentrate on him again. And if he just stayed out, that was the perfect setup for like an Ali shuffle to come out and save the day when she's back in the barn and all alone. You know what I mean? So she could have been hiding, and that could have been a really good haunt, like stalk and hunt scene. They could have redone the scene from part 3 in a certain way where like she was hiding from Jason, and then Clay could have come in to like, say she's trying to like, now he's trying to like recapture her. He's not trying to kill her. And the moment where like she tries to do something to him and that happens, Clay can come in and save the day. And I think it would have made it just kind of like they just kind of clumsily run to the next scene and say, like, okay, what do we do here? Oh, we back Jared Padalecki against the window and we steal the shot from part 4. And then we start this really like this fight of going back and forth, which is like they push each other back and forth, and the I don't know the way it's shot and like what's going on. I'm not really interested. I'm just like he's trying to put his face in the thing, and then the whole thing stops because she pulls a Ginny, and it doesn't feel earned. And so it feels like, again, superficial. I'm not really into it. I'm just like, you're just doing what they're doing before. You haven't set this up. It's not that strong because people are kind of backing off on him kidnapping her anyway. But like, I don't know. It was just odd. And then the final, like the kill is kind of cool where they put the bear trap on him and they wrap it around his neck and they start to hang him. And that becomes something like part 3. So you see that they're in they do the homage. The stunt work there is amazing. I mean, and Derek as a performer is amazing throughout the movie. He does a lot of great things. We can get into his performance. We can talk about that in a little bit. But like then he drops down and he's like going into the grinder, and she can do anything with that machete. And she like shoves it straight down his sternum. And it's like, what does it put the axe mark in? Like hit him in the face, like go right for the face. Like, what are you like? Why are you even like messing around? But it was also like my head, I was like, do something that he can survive. And I feel like what happened to him, I'm like, oh, you're really pushing the boundaries on what a human Jason can survive. And then the most like weirdest thing happens is now the night's over. You know, in the killer cut, they do that like scene where they go through all the crime scenes and they show the empty house and the bloody garage and all that stuff. And then it comes to them. And for some reason, again, they don't go to the authorities. They unlatch the serial killer from the thing that's got him stuck, drag him all the way down to the pier and throw him in the water. Like, do you think the police are going to want to know where the murderer is, or else they're going to think you murdered the people? Like,
I fucking hate the ending of this movie.
And that's it. And the ending is so lazy. And it's like, oh, he'll just jump out and do that. And you're like, and then the film just goes, get out of the theater. Yep. And you're like, oh, like, really? That's it? Like, that's what we got? And like, I don't know. I felt robbed. I felt like it leaned so hard on the old tropes, and it was just playing on nostalgia. It wasn't invigorating it, and it wasn't enhancing it. I wasn't learning anything new. And in fact, I was kind of being even more confused by the end of the film. And I would just, and so it took away from my enjoyment to just enjoy the kills and enjoy the characters. And there are moments that shine. Like the best moment in the movie to me is the axe throw. It's like, that's when I feel like Jason is like unleashed. And I was like, all right, here he goes. He's going to go murder all these motherfuckers now. And then it slowed down again. And it did that really kind of slow, like behind the thing kill. Like I wanted to see him like burst through the door and just start chasing people. And it never really got to that. It kind of turned into at the end. There's some cool shots of him running through the tunnels, which again, it's like, did they really need the tunnels? Was that really necessary?
Yeah, I mean, it's creative choice. It didn't really bother me one way or the other. I kind of liked that Jason had a little bit of a lair. I don't think that he built it. I mean, it looked like it was there. It existed before. He just kind of took it over and made it his own like little way that he gets around the camp, and is where he hides the bodies in the one room, and obviously keeps Whitney in the other one. But yeah,
it feels random though. Like it didn't bother me, and it hasn't really bothered me. But the more I think about it, it's like, but why'd they need that? Why couldn't they just make the camp a labyrinth? Like they had all those cabins, they had all that stuff. They could have worked a lot of stuff. Like there could have been a removable wall. You know what I mean? Like he could have done what he did in those tunnels to the camp. You know what I mean? He could have made the camp a trap house. That could have been like, can you imagine a scene where like if Jason really was the Rambo Jason and they go into a certain cabin and it's a trap, things like that I think would have been really, really cool. Like you walk into a cabin and you step on the rug and the rug is actually rigged so you fall through and fall on spikes. Like, and then to find his like, it kind of reminds me too of like playing the video game. Not so much the new one, but the old one where you had to go into the cabins and you had to go find that cabin. If that cabin was like a little bit more hidden, or was, you realize you're only going into half of it. And that's where he secluded in. And that's where Whitney and her boyfriend could have gone in the beginning. They could have found the secret access to that. And then it's all in one place and we understand where they are. And we understand how Jason's hidden and how he's remaining hidden. So it's like the film tried too hard to create something that definitely couldn't be seen when they had And they could have placed it in the camp, and that would have been a better setting for fans who understand the character and are a fan of Camp Crystal Lake and Jason. It's like it's in the camp. It lives in the camp, not below the camp. He's not the minor. Like that belongs to My Bloody Valentine. Mines belong to that. That's that setting. And so it kind of like it was a new. They brought in this new kind of place that nobody recognized. And you know, I think some people like really harp on it. I don't harp on it as hard. I just feel like they didn't need it.
Yeah.
And it, you know, I love the spirit of what it was. It was really cool seeing a lot of the nostalgia stuff they put in there. The scene where he's down there in the killer cut and he throws a temper tantrum is not good. I don't want to see Jason do that.
To me, that was to show that psychologically his mother's death is still fucking with him, which is kind of what they used to defend their choice to have him take a hostage. That's the way that I see it. Because he's sitting there, he's grinding his machete, and then the thoughts pop up in his head about seeing his mom get killed again, and he just fucking loses his shit. He goes over to her because he's like, part of him is still knows that that's not his mom, but he goes over to her, and then it's kind of like that thing stops him. And then that's when she kind of realizes that her physical appearance has some kind of effect on him, and she utilizes it to a much less successful degree than part 2, mind you, but she utilizes it at the end. So that, because that's the reason why I asked you. The biggest thing I was looking forward to with talking to you about this is because I wanted somebody to kind of shine a light on a lot of the issues that it seems very hardcore fans seem to have with the movie. And I've never had anybody like shine any light on it. Like you bring a lot of interesting points that I'm like, he's not wrong. You bring up certain things, but because most of the time when I debate this, when I've debated it in chats, when I've debated it on Killer Flicks, I always get the most surface level criticisms that don't make any sense. Like Jason doesn't run. This movie sucks. I'm like, Jason ran in 2, 3, and 4. And then Jason took a hostage. This movie sucks. I'm like, well, they established that, my whole defense for it, the psychology of his mother, she looks like him. It's the same thing that they utilized in part 2, only instead of a sweater, it's a living person. And some other things like, the characters, that's a subjective thing. They're certainly not the greatest characters in horror movie history. I find a lot of entertainment in Trent and in the bro-offs that you call it. And the only character that I don't really get a whole lot of entertainment from is the rap label guy, because he pretty much is there to make those jokes, try to masturbate, and then get killed. Chewy's kind of an entertaining guy because I think Aaron Yu is the actor. He was kind of popping up in everything around that time. He was in Disturbia, a couple other things. I think he's a pretty entertaining guy.
The other guy? The other guy is pretty entertaining too. The guy from Party Down, who takes the boat out. It's like, they're fine. They're just, I don't know. It's like I just don't feel like the film as a whole is very well handled. It feels very by the book. It feels very surface level. It doesn't feel like anyone's taking any real care to like, who are these characters and how can we really make them shine? It was just like, all right, I'll just film the jokes and we'll move on and we won't. Yeah. So there's that kind of side of it. But I can also, but that's the thing. It's like we all have different tastes, and so that's why it's like each group of kids is vastly different.
Yeah.
In all of the films, so it's like that's some people love those characters, and yeah, I mean you can't knock it if people, a lot of people do love it.
Yeah, I hear you. So I'll probably go over just to kind of cliff note my pros and cons with the movie, and we'll kind of go back and forth with those. So like I already kind of touched on it and you seem to agree. The biggest thing that I think the remake does well is Derek Mears and Jason. I think that Jason is awesome. I like his look. I know you what's the issue with the look exactly?
I just don't like it. Actually I wanted to say one more thing about the hostage thing. What would have made more sense is that if he had her down there and had her dressed up in the sweater.
Yeah.
And then I'd get it.
Yeah.
Like literally, you didn't have to go and throw a temper tantrum and kick a bunch of boxes around and be a little baby. Like if I walk in and I just see her chained and she's wearing the thing and she's looking petrified and he's just sitting there like touching her face. There's my scene. Like get in, get out. That's what I want to see. I just feel like they're just like, oh, we'll just have them. All right, just go kick that and we'll call it a day. But there's just certain things. I don't know. It's like I never really bought on to I wasn't a big fan of the jacket when it was first introduced. Freddy versus Jason, it's very big and it's very bulky. And this one, it's very big, it's very bulky. He's just like, there's just so much going on with his costume. And I didn't recognize the character that I kind of knew and loved. And they took the mask and they extended it so it was like it looks like a cereal bowl with like holes cut in it. And the way it sits on the mask and the way everything just fit together, I don't know. It just didn't do it for me. I felt like it just the shapes that he made and the way they shot him, like when he has the bag head, it kind of all fits. Like there's flowy, what's it called? Like fabric, and so the fat, like they kind of match. But when the mask went on, it just didn't feel like it fit that costume. And it sat funny on the face, and the way you could see the eyes through them, it was just kind of like just a lot of really odd looking looks for that costume. And like it was a big inspiration for the way I designed Ghost Jason, because I was like, there are elements there that are correct, but with a little bit of a taste shift, I'll go ahead and say it, I think I could do a better job. And the core elements of Ghost Jason are very much born from the early films, with the modern sensibilities kind of just a hint. It's like, if you're going to do the jacket, do a jacket that kind of feels like the work shirt. If you're going to do, a sweater, do something that kind of blends in and goes underneath, and like the pants. And like, I would say that like, if you broke it down structurally, like from the waist down, Jason's pretty awesome. Like the pants are really nice. The boots are good. I'm not a big fan of the machete hilt. I think that's just like, I think that's too much. I think that Jason is I got this thing over here, I'm going to use this. Oh, here's something I found over here, I'm going to use this. That's the style of Jason I want to see. The Jason that has like his like signature weapon on him, again, it takes me out of it a little bit. The jacket and like the t-shirt were a really odd combo. And then just the overall design of Jason. It's very over the top. It's very like, I don't know. I just didn't like it. I didn't like the way it looked. I thought that they went too far. It was just the strands of hair. Like I like bald Jason a little bit more than like strands of hair Jason. And there was just too much hair. It was just kind of an odd look. I just thought he was just an odd looking creature. And underneath was like this awesome actor who was kicking ass. But every time I saw the character on screen, it was just like, here I am with the mask kind of crooked dopey on my face. And like they would always like show it in like really weird times where like they show him on the edge of the ocean or the edge of the lake, and like they just push in on him, and you're like, I didn't need to see that. Like, show me his boots and I'm seeing him too much, and I don't know. I just don't like the way it looked. I really don't like that mask.
You can tell you're a filmmaker because a lot of the things you don't talk about it as things that you would have done differently. So it's it's more, it's like you dislike the movie for what it gave you or what it didn't give you. You know what I mean? So that's a cool perspective to have to listen.
It was more of like, I never really liked the look. And then I went and researched like, what are the things, like why, like, what is it about the jacket? And so I researched kind of like costuming and like different styles of jackets. It's like, I don't like that jacket. Like if I could sit there and like swap out a jacket, it was like, oh, here's one that looks good. Like, that's cool. This one just seems like, again, it felt over the top. It felt like Jason was never really that over the top of a design, up until like part 7. His clothes were pretty simple, and the way he looked was pretty simple, and it worked. I mean, the old designs, it's like designing Godzilla. It's like designing Michael. It's like designing Freddy. It's like, if you don't get the design right, it takes you out of the film. And this design it was one that took me out of the film for some reason. Like, it didn't, it was that. I think it was also the way that, like, did we talk before or after about the way the mask is found, which is very odd.
I think we did it before we went live.
Oh, we did it before we went. So like, and that's part of it too. It's like there wasn't a celebration of the costume. Like when he loses it's one of the biggest issues I have is that scene. It's like he loses the sack, and then he just randomly finds a mask in a bucket. And we knew that character was going to give it to him. That's the comedy relief. If you give that character the mask and the tree cutting scene, it's going to be, it's coming, and that kind of gives you something. It makes it kind of special, because it feels like such a throwaway. The whole thing feels like a throwaway, and that kind of carried with me as I was watching this. As he put the mask on, it wasn't very ceremonious. It was very like, well, we got to put this on at some point. Moving on. And it wasn't a very memorable scene, and it took away from like the iconicness of the film. Whereas before, like the first time we see Jason walk out into the dock with Shelley's mask, it's an iconic scene and it's really cool. It's the first time we've ever seen him in it, and I would definitely say the mask looks better on on Ted White than it does on Brooker. On that, the two of those designs, the Tom Savini redesign of the Part 3 Jason is kind of like the best of the best when it comes to a human Jason, humanish. Well, he's I guess he's human in that film if you play by that logic. And I was looking for something that rivaled it, and again, it's like when I look back at the old one, do I like this or do I like this? And I would pick any of the other Jasons over that one, except for maybe it's like down there with like Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X. It's like it lives in that realm as the movie does for me. In fact, if like you went and ranked my movies, it's almost like the same rank as my Jasons. Like as the Jason goes, the movie goes. Okay. In some cases, because my part 1 is up there. I think it's like my 4th or 5th in the spectrum. Yeah, so I mean, I just didn't really dig his look in it. And I didn't like that he had the machete. Like I wish he was like picking more stuff up, and he does. You know, he picks up the screwdriver. He does the axe, but it just feels like I feel like they did repeat the machete a lot. They have a Jason that runs, and he barely runs. When he does, it's just him running through the woods. Like I actually want to see him chase somebody down. Like that's the running Jason that I wanted to see. I want to see where somebody's running through the woods and he catches up. Like that's cool. I think like, you know, the scene where like Trent runs out to the car. It's a clumsy scene because like Trent's just standing there. Like who's he scared of? The guy driving the car? Do you really think Jason's driving the car? Like why wouldn't you run and be like, help me, this dude's coming at me? And then they do a really cool kill where he stabs him through the gut with the machete. He lifts him up and he starts sawing him in half. But every single shot is in here. You never see him complete. Like there's never one wide shot where you see his feet off the ground for a elongated amount of time going like this, which is like the money shot for that kill. You know, it's all tight. And then he slams him on the truck and he drives away, and the camera's all over the place, and like half the scene is out of focus. And like for a big budget film, when I was watching it today on HD, I was like, wow, they're like, I can see where like the rack focus is like shifting and like not hitting. I was like, wow, there's actually shots in here that like the focus is off. Like that's out of focus. And I was really surprised by that. Maybe it was me. Maybe I just had blurry eyes because I was up late last night. But like, but there were just certain things. Like there's just certain, I don't know. And overall, like, I think where I land is like Friday the 13th, 2009 is a $19 million production. Friday the 13th, 1980 is a $500,000 to $750,000 production that had nothing to draw from but its own story. This had all of the wealth of knowledge and still managed to come up, in my opinion, like mediocre. Like it's not a great film. Like it's fine. Like if you really just drop it, if I drop my guard and I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna let it go, it's fine. But it's supposed to, it's got to be better than fine. If you're gonna go back and remake something, it better be better than fine. It better be awesome. You better have a reason to remake it, and you better go back and do justice. And I feel like, you know, granted, it made at the time it made the most money for a Friday the 13th in an opening night and an opening weekend. It broke horror records, but it also broke a record of the steepest drop off ever, because the word of mouth did not carry. You know, the stunted version that they let out into the theater didn't do them any justice. The killer cut solved some of those issues, has some good additional material, but doesn't solve all the film's problems. And then where does the film go from here? Where does that, I mean, I know they wrote the sequel and like all of a sudden Whitney's under the water in the lake, and it just feels like that same empty, vapid space of that world of Friday the 13th, where like it doesn't matter what Jason does, he's just going to keep getting away with it, and there's no consequences for his actions. And it's not really, I just feel like it's kind of a world where Friday the 13th can do better than that and be way more entertaining.
Yeah. I mean, it works for me. I'll just say that.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
I think that, I mean, like I said, it's two different perspectives. It's a lifelong fan, somebody that holds the original films very in high regard. You have me that saw the remake before I saw more than half of the franchise. But even today, like just the flaws of 1980 are definitely, it is two different worlds, because you have, like you said, $19 million versus $500,000. There's certain things you can forgive for that. There's certain things that are just on, you know, surface level. This I don't like, this I do like. But
two different eras of filmmaking. I mean, they're playing by different rules. They're, you know, they're going to different audiences. Yeah, there's
absolutely, yeah. So we talked about Derek Mears. That was my biggest pro. I think that the production value, I mean, it's hard not to with the $19 million budget, but I think the production value is pretty damn good with the movie. The lighting is a big thing that I like, especially compared to the original, where it's very dark, especially in like the second half. But some of the ways that they light Jason, even in the scenes where like with Aaron Yu's character Chewie, whenever like the lights kind of flickering or whatever, and you just kind of see Jason behind. Like there's some really cool shots, and I like the design. So it kind of, for you, it highlights something that you don't like, but for me, it highlights a Jason that I like very much. So I like all of that. I also think that, and we talked about this subjectivity of this with the characters. The characters do entertain me quite a bit. I think that Trent is, like, everybody usually hates on Trent. Like, he's such a douchebag, and my defense is always, well, he's supposed to be. Like, he's written to be the douchebag. That's his entertainment value, is he's such an asshole that it's hilarious. Because everything that comes out of his mouth is just like, dude, this guy would have no friends. And even whenever he's, you know, he gets his big sex scene, it's like he drops the most douchebag, like, if this chick was not a whore, this would be the most, like, biggest turnoff for any female with any sort of respect whatsoever. You know what I mean? Everything that he says is hilarious. I really like Jared Padalecki's character. I like him a lot as an actor too. I mean, I'm a big Supernatural fan.
Yeah, it's hard not to like it.
Yeah, he's just a good character. But I like his storyline, like you said, kind of taking that storyline from part 4 and kind of making it more the forefront of the storyline for the whole movie. His motivations, I like his relationship and his kind of dynamic back and forth with Daniel Panabaker, because it's one of those things where it's like a flirtation, but it also doesn't fully go there. It's not like they fall in love by the end of the movie, and then of course we get the kill with Daniel Panabaker, which kind of seals the deal with that anyway, which is a nice little shot. I think that the fact that Whitney ends up being our final girl, she's not as strong of a character or an actress as Daniel Panabaker, but the story would make any sense if it was the reverse. So it's kind of hard to argue that. But I do like how they kind of cliff note the first 4 movies into one movie, because the story is kind of one of the bigger weaknesses overall with the franchise. It says a lot that you can do a movie and you could touch on the storyline of the first 4 movies in the runtime of 90 minutes or whatever. And that's where when I was hinting at filler. Whoa, I just went blurry there. When you were talking about, we hinted at filler when we were kind of wrapping up 1980, where scenes of filler. I feel like there's a lot of filler in that movie, and the other movies too. Like it feels like there are scenes there where they knew the kills was the highlight. They knew the kills was their money shot, and they had to kind of bide time until the kills came in a lot of ways. Some of it has to do with the fact that I'm not the biggest fan of the characters in the first movie, so that's probably why it feels more like filler in some scenes than a person who's a very big fan of the original. But I like how they wrap all that up. They wrap the storyline of the first 4 movies and kind of combine it together. It does leave not a ton of room for where they go in the future, especially with the way they decide to end this movie, which I do have some cons, so we're going to get into that. But I enjoy the fact that you can have different elements of the lore and different, wink and nod moments and everything, which some of the creative choices, especially with somebody who's got a lot of creative input like you do, some of them will annoy you with the way that they kind of do the wink and nod moments. But I think for the casual moviegoer, I like a lot how they kind of they really load the movie with all these moments that you're going to be like, oh, hey, that's from part 2, oh, that's from part 4, and I think that adds entertainment value for me.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm a different level of nerd on stuff. I'm paying attention to things that go way deeper than what most people are going in and doing, and that's my plight. that's my cross I have to bear when I go and I watch Friday the 13th movies, or like I can't help it. Like it's part of what.
Dude, I'm right there with you though, because like it's not quite to the detail level that you're getting into, because I'm not a filmmaker, and there's a lot of things that you see that I actually don't even know how to look for. But like it's the same problem that I have with the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. Like I'm a Freddy fanatic. I know these movies like the back of my hand. I know the character, and there are some defenders, people that really like the remake, which is cool. But when I watched the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, despite the fact that I do think people are way too hard on it, I don't think that it belongs in the bottom of a ranking ever when Freddy's Dead exists. But when I watch the remake and when I talk about the remake, there are cardinal sins in that movie where I'm like, how the fuck, like making him to where he seems innocent, making it to where they get rid of the child murderer aspect and just he's a child molester, like all these things that are just, some people will look at it and be like, oh, it's this new direction. I'm like, no, that fucks it up completely. So I have that perspective with certain franchises, and I'm sure I'm hoping I'm not gonna have too many, but when this Child's Play remake comes out, if there are things like that, I'm going to be the first person standing up in the theater saying, bullshit, that doesn't work. So it's the passion for the franchise character that comes out that creates all of those things that it blocks you from enjoying.
That Chucky movie is really going to divide people. It's going to be hilarious. There's going to be some flame wars. Oh, get ready.
I cannot fucking wait. I can't wait
to be funny.
My line saying how great it is and how everybody was wrong and everybody flame warring me like I did for Halloween 2018 when I was the first person online to say it's not flawless. You know, it's fun. You know, if you're somebody that can handle the trolls, it's fun.
Yeah, and and that's the thing. I think it's like either you with Freddie, me with Jason. It's a different level of love, and like, you know, you just want to see the best. And and I think that, you know, it's just, there were just so many things that, like, my taste, I was like, I would have enjoyed it more if this, and you know, and then just flat out just like not liking some things, and that's my right as a fan, being like, I don't know, I'm not into this as much as other people are. This isn't my style. And I think the thing that we have in common with Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th is that when you watch that Nightmare on Elm Street, I bet to you it was like, I don't feel like I'm watching the movie I love. I don't feel like I'm watching the franchise I love right now. I feel like I'm watching something else. Yeah. And that's how it feels when I watch Friday the 13th 2009. I don't feel like I'm watching the franchise I love. I feel like I'm watching this weird, like, sci-fi, like, bizarro world Jason, where it's like everything I'm like not a big fan of in the franchise is like put under a microscope, and all the things that like made me scared as a kid were like tucked away and ignored. And that's part of why I made Never Hike Alone too, because it was like, I think that there's so much more to Friday the 13th in this character and this world and the way you can present him and the way you can present the character, that if you drop the load of all the bullshit that doesn't even belong in the film and you just focus on how scary he can be, that's how the film will be super entertaining. Yeah. And you know, when you add that for a film that's like more kills and things like that, and they took that aspect and kind of stretched that out into a longer film or a longer piece, that, like, I think that is where the trajectory goes for it. But go into your cons of 2009. Or do you have any more pros that you wanted to cover?
No, that pretty much wraps it up. But as far as cons, I really just have three overarching cons, because I think the movie is very entertaining for what it does. Doesn't fix the mistakes of the past. Like, it tries to be better, but it brings the mistakes to the forefront. And so there's some things that it does where, like the Jason, I think is an improvement. I think that some of the ferocity in the character is an improvement. But, you know, bringing the whole plot hole issue of where the fuck was this kid when his mom was going nuts to the forefront is a mistake. The whole thing with like that we were kind of debating back and forth with the Jason bed and the fact that they were living on the camp. Like, there's things that they bring in there that you're kind of like, okay, the mistakes of the franchise since the beginning is continuity and not explaining things and just, like you say, shut up, dummy, and watch. And it's kind of like that. But if you're going to try to up the stakes and try to up the ante, then don't bring the mistakes to the forefront, because when you have it, it's easy to ignore the mistakes in kind of a lower production movie that's not going for a whole lot. And it's a franchise that definitely relishes in kind of the B movie charm of itself. When you get to 2009 and it's trying to be a very modern, serious horror film, when you have the same types of flaws, they show a lot more when they're stacked up against a totally different landscape. So that's kind of one of the big things, which you hammered pretty hard on in some of yours. So I know you agree with that. Just some straightforward, nonsensical decisions. Like the biggest one for me that I've always kind of not made a whole lot of sense of is you have this badass beach house. Obviously, Trent's family has lived there for years and they've visited for years. They would have encountered Jason before now. So the fact that they're literally a small hike away from Camp Crystal Lake is just it's like putting Gotham across the street from Metropolis. It just doesn't quite fit. You know, it fits the convenience of what you're trying to do and get the characters to the camp quickly. But when you start thinking about it, it's like, no, they would have gotten a machete in their ass before now.
And the house really isn't that interesting. If you think about like part 2, part 3, part 4, each have interesting places. You have Packanack Lodge, which has a very distinct look and a very distinct layout, and it serves a purpose of the film, like the way that they go around it. Then you go to Higgins Haven, which is, it was a film studio. That it wasn't a true place, but I mean, a lot of stuff's been filmed there and has since burned down. But it had a look. It had a look. And then the Jarvis residence, which has a look, has a feel. Again, lots of movies were shot there. And then you have this house, which just feels like not very memorable. It's just kind of, it's so blah, you know what I mean? Like, it's a rich person's house, but it's not interesting. It's not an interest. There's nothing like the barn that they shoot at is pretty interesting, where they go and have the final scene. Like, why couldn't the kids be like, it had to be that guy's house? It would actually make more sense for these kids if they went to a place that wasn't theirs. They were staying on a property like a Higgins Haven that had like, they kind of had this like all there. It was all in one central location. And in this film, they spread it out through all the different locations, right? I think is like kind of odd. Like, I was thinking that, like, when they went to the barn, I'm like, it would be cooler if they were staying on this property.
Yeah.
And then they're the babes in the woods who don't, and that's what the Friday the 13th teens were in the back. They didn't know anything about it. Like, Trent is from this area. He should know more than anybody about what's going on around there. And if they were that close, why is this the first time that Jason has ever messed with them? Yeah. And the reason is because Jason is supposed to be smart, and he only kills people that does that. It's just for the purposes of the film, he ignores exactly what he's supposed to be doing just to like start killing people and make the film move, rather than like him being drawn out and summoned out by, because you have Clay and Whitney get in there. They almost get caught. Why did it take so long? Another funny thing. So when Clay and Whitney are hiding under the canoe, they're the bottom one. Why does Jason remove like all of the canoes before he removes the bottom one? Like, I'm gonna get to you eventually. Oh, you're not there. You know what I mean? Like, I actually would have been more scared if it was a shot that like was pulling up with them and like he's going right for it, like right where you're like, oh shit, because they moved before he started any of that stuff anyway. So just go right to it. And there's just weird decisions that are made throughout the film, and it's just like very superficial. Very like not much thought going into this. It was just throw a bunch of stuff around and act like a crazy person. It was like, I wanted to see a focused rage Jason. And I feel like this was a like, every time he threw a temper tantrum, every time he did that stuff, he was focused in some ways. And if they just would have maintained that and done some things and like really honed into some of the things that Derek was doing right with the character, I think that they really missed an opportunity. I think they missed a lot of opportunities, and that's what's really frustrating about the film. It's not that it's an awful, awful film. I mean, it's entertaining. It looks really good, but there's so many missed opportunities along the way that it's like, oh, you were so close. Yeah. Like, and I think that, it's kind of the way I watch it, but I can't help it. But what you have more?
I have one final one, which you already touched on, and I kind of touched on as well. It's just the ending. It's the literal final scene. I can't stand it. One of my biggest gripes with horror, like my least favorite horror cliche of all time, is, the evil lives on. Like the final little scare when, he's not dead. Because more times than not, there's no thought or effort put into it whatsoever. Like one of the best ones ever, not to go on a tangent, is from The Collection, the sequel to The Collector, where it feels like the evil lives on. You see his mask burning. We'll see in the sequel, and then they flip it on you with that final scene and what Arkin does. So not to get into spoilers or anything, because people should really check that movie out. But like that's a good example. You get into this, and this is probably the most lazy version of that I could think of. For as big of a fan of this movie as I am, like that was the biggest thing when I saw it for the first time in 2009. I was like, well, that kind of sucked. Like you said, like just nonsensical, which kind of ties into my second one too. It's just, why put him back in the water? Why drag? Why are you even touching him? Why aren't you just getting the fuck out of there, if nothing else? Like that doesn't make sense. And then just the laziness of, oh, I'm just going to kick his mask into the water and I'm just going to be rejuvenated out of nowhere suddenly. And he just comes up and crashes through and grabs her. Movie's done. And it's like, no, that whole bullshit thing about, we have to tease that he's going to be back for the sequel. There's a million ways you can do it right. And this is not one of them.
Not the strongest way. It's not that it definitely wasn't the strongest ending to a film. If they wanted to do anything with that, it should have been a dream sequence. Whitney should have woke up. She should have got woke. She should have woke up in like an ambulance or something. They could have done like a Chris Higgins or, Amy Steele being led into the thing type thing. They could have done something where when he jumps out of the water, he could at least have the mask off. Can we get one really good look at that face? I mean, you spent a lot of friggin' money on that face and you do not show it at all. The only shot it appears in is a wide shot and it's in the shadow. And like, I'm totally for masking it in shadow, but when you do a face reveal in a Friday the 13th film, you got to show it. And we see it in every other film. In the end of part 2, we see that sucker coming through, and we see all of Warrington Gillette's face. You know, in part 3, we see Richard Brooker pull the mask off and claw at the window, and it's his face. It's like part 4, we see his face. He gets chopped in the face, and even in the cut scene from that film that they took out of the movie, where she goes into the bathroom and finds the mom's eyes open, they're white, it's scary, and then there's, you know, chopped face Jason standing beside her with the mask off. If you're going to have him jump out of the film, why is he going to swim down to the bottom of the lake, put the mask back on, clip it back together, and then swim up? Like, show me that face, baby. Like, you spent some money, show it off. And like, they don't. And that was it was one of the most expensive looking Jasons. I mean, he had the bodysuit, he had the big head, the big bulbous head that was like lopsided, like the eye, the teeth, the dentures. I've seen those dentures. They're insane. It's like, why did you hide that? Like, what were you so like? You should have showed the crowd that. If you spent that much money designing that Jason for it to all be covered up for the entire film, you wasted so much money when you should just, like, you know, I don't know. It's just like a wasted breath on it.
Yeah, and that one little element there would have made the ending more forgiving. If he jumped out without the mask and that was the only time we got to see it, that would have at least, like, it'd be like, okay, well, it still doesn't make sense why they put him there, but at least we got the face reveal at the end. It would have been cool. So it's like, that's one of those times when you say like simple little decision making things that I can totally agree with, because the way as is, that ending is just terrible. Like, as soon as they show, like in the Killer Cut, they show the little montage of all the crime scenes. Like, I want to turn the movie off right there because I'm like, oh yeah, we got that other scene coming.
And that, I mean, there's some good in there. If they would have, like, what they show is a little, I don't know. They show like the leaves in the kitchen, and they show the blood on the fridge and stuff like that. They probably could have, like, maybe showed the bodies. Oh, there's like a couple scenes like in the Killer Cut. They're running back to Camp Crystal Lake, and they run by Whitney Ford's character who got hit by the boat and stabbed in the head. Like, she's on the side of the boat, and like she literally goes, "Oh my God, it's her!" and then keeps running. Like, scream! Like, there's a dead body. Like, this is the time where, like, this is the classic Friday the 13th moment when the character sees all the dead bodies, they scream their head off every time they see a dead body. That's what's supposed to drive the scene, and like they're very casual to it. The characters are often too casual with the scene. They're too cool. Like, they're always brooding and I'm ready. Like, they're never like actually like brutally afraid of anything. I mean, I think Whitney does a little bit in certain places. She plays that pretty well, but yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's an odd bunch of choices that just kind of slowly pull the strings of the movie and you know turn it into a bad experience for me.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, like, I'm glad I got your perspective on it, because it does make a little bit more sense to me. If everybody could articulate those issues the way that you have, I would be more forgiving of all the hate for the movie. But like I said, for pretty much 90% of my experience so far is the cheap face level, like, digs that you could take. Like, so it makes me understand a little bit more. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm probably guilty of as well. And I wanted to take the time to, like, really understood what it was about the movie that, like, bugged me, because I didn't want to just do that. Be like, well, it just sucks and it's stupid. It's got tunnels. And it's like, no, because there was, like, you know, because I can sit here and think of like 1,000 different ways that, like, they weren't far off from it, but it was like, why did you make that decision? It seems like did you not think of that? And listen, like, again, going back to filmmaking is one of the hardest things to do. Going back and fixing the Friday the 13th franchise is not an easy task, because it is a mess. The franchise is a mess with continuity errors and logic errors, and it's filled with it. And I think you can be a fan and laugh at it, and you can enjoy it, and it can be part of the charming part. But it was like, I think that by the time 2009 came around, it was like, all right, show me a movie that's got its shit together. Like, show me a movie that, like, takes all that stuff and goes, all right, now that because you can forgive the old ones because they didn't know what they were doing. They never meant to create Jason. Jason was never supposed to be a reoccurring character. They just kept making money, and so they kept making stories, and whatever fit. And this character was born out of it, and they didn't really figure it out until 6 or 7 movies in, and then they really started to lose their game on it. And it was like, if you could just figure out the character that you found and matched him with the elements that made the first 4 good, you got a character that's great, like this undead being that lives in the lake, that gets resurrected in the name of his mother's revenge, with the brutal stalking hunting style of the original films and the simplicity of the original films in those types of settings without going to the cliche world. You can create some really good Friday the 13th content. It just felt that like it was missing half the equation of what makes Friday the 13th great. They really hung on to the stuff of the first 4, but they forgot to include all the stuff that like really made Jason iconic. Jason wasn't completely iconic until he started showing up on Arsenio Hall, even though that's like one of the worst movies, part 8. But like Jason really became iconic after part 6 and part 7, you know, when Kane Hodder took the mantle, and when, you know, he doing music videos with Alice Cooper in part 6. It's like, you know, Jason became like the public icon then. And so it was like, that's really who the characters think of. And I feel like they lost their way kind of back half of the thing. Like Freddy versus Jason, he kind of, again, and it's funny that it came from Shannon and Swift, because Shannon and Swift wrote Freddy versus Jason, and they wrote the undead version of Jason. And I don't know why they didn't take that thinking, or they weren't presenting that type of world about how that happened. You know what I mean? I don't think Jason goes to hell in a certain realm with the Necronomicon and being a deadite and all that stuff is necessarily the way to go. That's the way Adam Marcus wanted to take it. That's his cross to bear and how he wants to present but it's like we were looking for something in there that kind of explained it. And like you said, this film doesn't explain it. It just kind of hangs a hat on the old trope that and kind of shines a light on it, and you go, oh, this is really more broken than you thought. And here's the big issue: if he's alive when she's killing people, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
You know, and it's when you get into the headiness of it. Like on the surface, you just watch it and go, "Oh, yeah, that sucks."
I hear you. That's a good transition where I want to close this thing out. I think we both had some really good points for 1980 and some good points for 2009. I certainly appreciate the different perspective, like I've said, because I've been a huge defender of the movie, and I just feel like I've been throwing bullets at tissue paper with some of the arguments that I've been having. So. So that's a good perspective to show. But where we could wrap this up with where you were just kind of going there at the end. Obviously, the franchise is in a little bit of legal shambles right now. So we don't know how many years we are away from finally getting another Friday the 13th. I think now with the success of Halloween 2018, we're going to start to see a lot more traction with some of these franchises and stuff. Where do you want the franchise to go? Do you want like a full-on reboot? Do you want a sequel to the 2009 remake? Do you want them to pull a Halloween 2018 and go back to a certain timeline in the franchise and continue from there? What would you do? You have the keys to the franchise. What does Vincent DiSanti want to do?
I just want to complete the story that we've all been waiting to see completed. I feel like the original Paramount like arc was just left unhinged to do. You know, they kind of tried. They almost ended it with part 6, and then they resurrected it in part 7. But I think it's like I want to go back to the simplicity. I want an undead Jason. I want a Jason that's unstoppable. Let's make him a little bit different from Michael, because Michael is a physical, breathing human being, and he's been held in captivity. That's his quality. Make Jason different. Make Jason really unique. And I think that like if they honed on the type of thinking of like the way the Mummy's curse works, and if you really hearken on the death curse, and they talk about it in the, you know, hearken onto the themes of the original films that were never utilized, like the death curse. What is the death curse? And if you see the death curse in action, it's Jason. And make Jason part of a curse. Make that kind of be the central theme of it. That way you can write. It makes more sense that like he came back from the dead after, you know, you honor the first film and you say he died in that lake. And when his mother died, he came back as the living embodiment of revenge to now take Bond there. And he lives in this world, and he's in this camp, and he's protecting it. And anyone who comes into this land, which is what the original is about, it's if someone tells you don't go somewhere, don't go there. And if someone tells you it's bad luck, bad things are going to happen to you, that's what's going to happen. You know, don't go into the cheesiness of the sequels where it's like we pulled him out of the camp just to get him out of the camp because we had nowhere for him to go. Let's just kill some people. It's like, make it about the camp. Make the camp a character. Make all of that kind of, you know, focus on the things about the franchise that, you know, or what we remember. Like, that's why I love part 6. It's at the camp. He's undead. He's unstoppable. And bring it to that level of action. And let's see that Jason out there on a high budget, or just a better budget, better storytelling. Like, strip away don't follow the formula anymore. Let's get rid of that formula, and let's start coming up with like really unique ways to tell stories about Jason, the way that you would encounter Jason. Don't think about like, how do you make a new Friday the 13th movie? Think about the scariest ways to encounter Jason and write those stories. That's where Never Hike Alone came from. It was, this would be really scary if you were hiking by yourself and you stumbled upon Jason. That's the simpleness of the plot. And I was like, if they want to come and give me the reins, like, let's go make Never Hike Alone 2 and 3 and 4 and the whole thing. I mean, I can stretch out that series front to back and it all ties into the original films. But what I'd like to see happen is I'd like to see Friday the 13th come to Netflix. I think it would serve so much better to make a bunch of Friday the 13th content at once and release it as a series and do either a series of films or like a series, like come up with a franchise plan, whatever you do. Like whoever goes in and takes care of the mantle, like really think 2-3 films deep. Start thinking Marvel Cinematic Universe, Friday the 13th Cinematic Universe, like characters that are going to come in, things that you can tie in either if you want to bring in the alumni or not. But like understand that this is a town and this is a place and you actually have real characters that can come in and out and it should have effects on things on the outside. So it's like, I want to see smarter writing and I want to see Jason be the center character, the driving engine of it all. It's like this curse that no one can stop and people keep accidentally unleashing. Never Hike Alone was like an unofficial sequel to like all the old films. I didn't try to focus on undoing or redoing anything from the films. It was just that happened and this is where Jason is today. And as we remember Jason, he was undead and undying and he still lives in the camp. And there are elements that I plucked from the series that were like, I felt the high points of like certain things that like, this is what fans want to see. And this is how you can build on top of it and build on top of that lore and enhance the lore. So not create new content for the sake of creating new content because you're trying to fill plot holes, but use the plot content that's there and amplify it. Like the head and the way he lived, like we were talking about the way he lives in the camp. It's like, that's Jason to me. Is like, he lives within the camp. Make the camp the character, make the camp the maze, make the camp the dangerous place to go. Don't bring the audience somewhere else they've never been before. And don't like, nobody cares that there are tunnels. Like they want to be in the camp. The camp is what's scary. That's supposed to be the experience with Friday the 13th. It's a camp movie. So make it a camp movie. If they were going to reboot it, I want to see a reboot from the beginning. I want to see someone try to go reopen the camp. They've never redone that idea. They did it in part 6 a little bit, but they called it Camp Forest Green. But if they did like somebody going back after another 30 years being like, well, I'm going to try and buy the land around Camp Crystal Lake and build it again, that's a movie I'd watch. I'd watch the movie that Friday the 13th, 2009 has at the beginning, a bunch of people on a hiking trail who stumble into it and don't get out. David Bruckner had a really great script with Nick Ancosta when it was going through development, where it was the kids at Camp Crystal Lake, the new one, know about the old one. On the last night of camp, they're all getting in boats and going across the lake and going to visit the old Camp Crystal Lake, and they resurrect Jason by accident. And so it's like, that's a cool movie. And like Jason's undead in that film and comes back over and over again. So it's like, that's the Jason I want to see. I want to see a Jason that doesn't go down. I want to see him individually stalk and kill people. And when you go in and you make a Friday the 13th, what made Friday the 13th the thing back in 1980s was they were doing the most inventive kills. They were doing the highest budget kills. They were doing some of the best on-screen kills than any other franchise. And that's what makes the major four really stand out, is they had great characters. They had really great character design, but they also led the way on really interesting kill scenes. So the new Friday the 13th also has to go into like, we need to come up with some really good new slasher kills. Yeah. And so like that's where they need to put their focus, is a focus on the isolated, really graphic, really good looking kills and a very simple story with a Jason that is unstoppable. And I'm there.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is what you just touched on the end there. So the kills to me is what needs to get the forefront. I've said that a couple of times before. They need to come up with some really great, inventive, like badass, memorable kills and start there. Like figure those out and then figure out all the stuff that should be easy, because you got the greatest story in the world, but a Friday the 13th movie with weak kills is a weak Friday the 13th movie. So yeah, that's a big thing for me. I've kind of given this little mini pitch on a couple of streams before. So I had kind of, it's not a complete idea. It's more of just kind of broken little thoughts that I've had about where they could take the franchise that I'm going to pitch to you real quick. So an idea that I have for what I would think would be a really cool reboot for this franchise. And it stems from some of the things that you said you wanted to see, is somebody going back and reopening the camp. I don't necessarily think it matters whether they continue with the 2009 movie, if they're going to redo the camp from that continuity, or if they're just going to go back and reopen the camp from any one of the movies. It could not have any ties whatsoever and just be, you know, inserted into the timeline. You choose wherever the hell it fits in, but they're going to reopen Camp Crystal Lake. And I view the movie like aesthetically of how Sleepaway Camp was, where there's kids running around. It's an active camp. There's campfires. There's songs, all that kind of stuff. Like, camp has been open. Camp Crystal Lake is in session. And there is one of the kids in the movie who is only referred to by the other characters with some name that they give him because he's bullied the entire time. So like, we'll say, you know, loser. They give him a name that they only call him that. And this kid's bullied continuously. And at the end of the first act of the movie, you know, Jason's this active curse. Maybe we get a scene very similar to part 2 where they kind of give the little, you know, did you hear the story about Jason and the woman or whatever? So everybody knows about Jason. And somehow he resurrects Jason. He activates that death curse somehow. The rest of the movie, I want a Derek Mears style Jason shot like Ted White's Jason, where they show like the lightning flashes and the shadows. And I want him to be the fierce running Jason, like the unstoppable freight train. But like one of your critiques with the 2009 remake, just hide him a little bit more. You know what I mean? Make him a bit more of a tense, like, stalker.
Well, I think part of it too was, so one of the things that I noticed was when he's running around with that coat, it creates, his body becomes a blob. And in the old films, like, you always see his limbs. Like, his limbs are always part of his character design. It actually adds to the character. And sometimes, like, Derek does do a good job of getting his arms outside and doing that stuff. But there's a lot of times where the jacket gets kind of caught up and he turns into an amorphous. And the black kind of really hides a lot of the shape. And so the green, like maintaining the green and getting a color that actually picks up light, because black doesn't pick up light. So you don't see creases and folds. The green picks up light. So when he's shadowed, you can see a little bit more of him. You can see the outline of his body. And there's something about being able to see a little bit more of his silhouette in those shadowed kind of shots that really make him more iconic on screen. And I think that that's where 2009 was falling short with me, is it wasn't creating those iconic moments of him. Like, he's always kind of oddly framed, or like when he's running the camera, like the camera's really shaky. Like, there's shaky cam, and then this is like I put the camera in a blender. And that's one thing that that's the cinematography is because it is in the film. It does make some odd choices or poor choices with the shaky cam and how shaky it is. I think that they could have controlled that a little bit more.
Gotcha. For real. So, continuing from there, so we get Jason resurrected, and that's the style of Jason that I want. So to kind of cliff note the rest of it, then we get the kills. Like, I don't have any kills pitched or anything like that, but that's where you would have somebody where they focus on the kills. They go for the kid counselors. If they have balls, maybe even kill the kid, even though I know they're not going to. But, you know, something along the aesthetic of Sleepaway Camp, where there's an active camp going on, people are being killed and hidden, and you can even have a reveal like in the 1981 where by the time shit's hit the fan, people realize what's going on. You go and you see all these dead bodies that have been, you know, put on display in various areas of the camps or whatever. But the big reveal towards the end is that, you know, this kid who's been tormented, that is gone unnamed, that accidentally unleashed this death curse, has to be the one to stop it. So him and whoever's left figures out some way to stop Jason, which I haven't quite, you know, connected the dots with, but basically they stop Jason. The ending of the movie is the parents coming to reclaim all the kids after, you know, the cops have been called. You know, you see a scene where like the cops are coming, parents are picking up the surviving kids, the 1 or 2 camp counselors that are left. And when the mom comes to pick up the tormented kid, it's revealed that it's Tommy Jarvis.
Oh, there you go. In like a remake style, right?
Kind of, yeah, like reintroducing the character.
Oh, that's
be like,
cool.
Like a nice little nod, and then you could continue the story from there. Is just, you know, now the camp has this blood on it again. Do we continue with the camp setting, and then you have the death curse thing, so you can bring Jason back easily.
Well, you just fed that concept in my Friday the 13th brain, and I'm going to pitch something right back to you, which I could sum it all up is what you kind of described to me would be a movie that's kind of like Goonies meets Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
Like the kids are kind of like little kids are the characters, the ones that uncover it. Obviously, the adults are the ones who gets it, but the kids are kind of like the driving force. We're watching the kids at camp rather than the adults, and I think that's actually a really, really cool angle. And that's why I'm saying I think that that's where the film can bridge outside of itself. It's like it doesn't have to be just the teenagers. You can follow different characters, and that's really scary. Like kind of similar to what Bruckner did. It's like if the kids stumble into the wrong part of the camp, they hear about it, they know about it, and they want to see it. And so it reminds me a little bit of The Burning too, like with Cropsey and like Cropsey's cabin, and it got burnt down, and going out and seeing it. There's a mystery there to it. You know, and I think if you took the time to explain where the Voorhees lived, like maybe she rented a cabin on the other side of the cove, you know what I mean? Like, and she walked with Jason to camp every single day, and so the kids are going to take the trail out to the Voorhees cabin, which isn't right there at the camp, but which is a good 15 to 20 minute or even 30-minute hike, you know, into a creepy part of the forest, Pet Cemetery style. You know what I mean? Like, it makes it like the geography of 2009 like falters in that, because it's like it feels like the house is right there in the camp, and like it would have been nice for it to feel like it was a separate place. So it was kind of odd on that front, but no, I like that. I think that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, I have a show that I did 2 episodes of called Pitch Wars, where one episode I did with a channel, Durbani, where we pitched our DC movie, and then I did one with CP where we pitched our slasher film. So I've kind of been in that pitch mode where I start to think of like, where would I take things? Like, I don't have any filmmaking experience whatsoever, so I'm the last guy you should hand a franchise to. But as far as just a fan thinking of ideas, I was trying to think of one in case I did an episode on Friday the 13th, and just kind of pulling some ideas. I kind of thought of that. That'd be a cool little reveal, because I like the elements of the remake where they kind of give nods to the old ones. But, you know, Tommy Jarvis is probably the most iconic character aside from Jason in the franchise. I was like, well, how would you reintroduce him? And I thought that might be a cool little way. And like you said, Goonies meets Friday the 13th. That would be a very aesthetically different movie, because the kids, I mean, do you even see kids in any movie besides Part 6?
No.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. That's one of the biggest things that's missing for me for this franchise is for a camp slasher. You never really see the camp or an active camp going on. It's always just it's like the camp is either gone, or you get the first movie where they're trying to bring it back, but they get stopped. So
it's funny. Yeah, I mean, like so Tommy Jarvis is really the first kid in the films, and then it's funny because it's like each film is kind of like a restamp of the previous film, and they add like one more element, and then that element kind of keeps going. Like, so they added the kid, and then they did Reggie the Reckless in Part 5 to try and bring that kid element back. And then Part 6 was really a game changer because it really changed. It wasn't your typical Friday. It wasn't the same form. And it was the first time like the format changed and the production value changed and the Jason changed. He was completely undead. And then you brought the kid back into the camp and you renamed the town and all that fun stuff. But yeah, it's really the first time we ever see kids. But it's like, again, it's like there were things that were discovered later on in the franchise that were good ideas. It was just that the rest of the franchise was running out of steam. So it's like if you restarted with a fresh perspective and you brought the elements that worked into Friday the 13th that happened later on in the film, it's like you want to crossbreed those two worlds and you're going to get like the best of both. Yeah, and I think making it, like you said, like making him undead is like, it's what can separate him out from the rest of the pack and, you know, allow you to take it in so many different ways. Yeah, and I would love to see a Pamela story. I kind of, it depends. It depends on kind of how far it goes. I don't know how far. I know that like I want to write a Pamela short that I think kind of explains kind of her life. But I don't think that if you did a true Pamela backstory or biopic that it would be necessarily a Friday the 13th film, because I would never think of Pamela Voorhees to be a character that would have killed before the night that her son died. So it's you know, for me, she's a character who is, and her and Jason were very innocent up until that happened. So like to ever go like I just don't like when it's like they go back and they want to do the cliche thing of like what they tried to do in like the last script where like Elias was abusive and
I'm glad.
You know, it's just it's so overdone. It's like, no, they're single mom. There was no dad. You want to know what happened to Jason's dad? He bailed. And that's what happened because the kid was deformed. You know, I think Betsy Palmer says it in an interview. She said the way it was read to her and the way that she did it was she slept with her high school sweetheart and he bailed. And she was left with this kid, left with this burden, and basically had to make it work because her family disowned her, her friends disowned her, nobody would help her, and she had to help herself. And that's what bonded her and her son. That's the story between her and Jason. I think that's the strongest version of it. I think when you start getting the abusive stuff and you start getting there, it just gets cliche and uninteresting. I started to get uninterested because I'm like, it's like that wasn't it. They were just outcasts, and that's what makes them so unique, is that they were outcasts. And that's why people glom onto Jason, is because he was an outcast who was bullied, who's coming back and taking revenge. So it's like you just play, it's taking the seed and enhancing that seed, not being like, and he was bullied and he had an abusive dad and he had this stuff, because it's extra elements that aren't needed there because the story material is already strong enough on its own if you just present it in the right light.
Yep. Totally agree. Yeah, I'm glad that last script got wiped out.
Did you read it?
I didn't read the script. All I had to hear was the pitch that it's going to be Jason's father. They're going to dive in. I was like, oh God, you lost me.
Yeah, I've luckily had a bunch of sneaky squirrels across the industry who, every time that there was a new script, the only one I don't have is the Shannon and Swift script, but I have the David Bruckner script, and I have that script too. The guy who wrote Prisoners, I read that version, and I was sorely disappointed. There's some cool kills in it. There was definitely some cool kills, really cool kills in the Bruckner one. The Bruckner one was definitely much closer, and it was only a first draft. But yeah, no, it's kind of good that we missed out on that one, because I think that really would have put the final nail on the coffin. Friday the 13th, Part 13, the 13th film really has to be like this. No, we need something that's like really gonna like reinvigorate it and bring it back. And hopefully, once they're done pushing papers around and figuring out who's getting what money, they just start cranking these things out again. And there's so many outlets. There's YouTube, there's Netflix, there's the film. They can do so many things with Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th doesn't have to live in just one place. They can go out and make different. They should make animated Friday the 13th films. Because imagine Jason in animation, how cool that would look. Like, somebody was talking about I don't know if you saw, but there was this kind of clip going around from a Japanese anime where it basically took the scene from Part 3 where Chris hits him in the head with the axe, and they animated just that bit. And I was like, oh my God, I'd watch that cartoon. And it ended up being a flashback in a movie, but like, I'd watch a Jason cartoon. They just did animated Godzilla, with a 3-part series on Netflix. Like, all the things you could do with Jason in animation, the types of kills you could come up with, the types of stuff you like, there's stuff you can't do in live action that you can really get into Jason's head in animation. We can see things about the way he's connected to his mother that will make sense in an animated world. So why not like an animated series on Netflix, or like a Pamela story on Netflix, or like even like a Never Hike Alone miniseries on Netflix that we could go and make a bunch of versions of this and do it. I think that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm holding off on it too. It's like, I really want opportunity, because I feel like Never Hike Alone opened up this opportunity, and it's the B storyline of a much bigger story now. Never Hike Alone 1 is the B story to what Never Hike Alone 2 would be. And it's really like a long dormant play. Like, imagine you have characters living in a town that have dealt with the horror of Jason. They're still living with it, but the horror is gone. And then one day, this dumbass walks into Camp Crystal Lake and pisses Jason off and pulls him back into town. And after 30 years of silence, Jason's coming into town. What are they going to do? Yeah. And I feel like that's a strong enough concept to where I could pitch that as a feature-length film and be like, Never Hike Alone is like the graphic novel you read before going in to know what happens to this B story character in the major film. Because we wouldn't show a lot of that stuff. We would just kind of see the aftermath of somebody going in, and then somehow they survive, and the oncoming storm that's going to be following them, and this mystery that's been hiding in the woods is going to reveal itself finally after all this time, and this long dormant beast has been reawoken, much like a mummy's curse. That's why I think that thinking kind of works. It's because once you've been cursed, the curse comes for you. And that concept is very like, once Jason picks you, he's going to keep coming in a lot of different ways. And one, he's going to come out and try to kill you. But then we have the Tommy side of the story where like, he's going to haunt you. So not only is he coming and trying to stalk you and lure you back into the camp and come find where you are, he's also haunting your memory. And you're forever haunted by that curse, something that Tommy still deals with. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that if we did a sequel, it'd be all about Tommy. But it kind of picks up on that. And I think a lot of Friday the 13th fans want that. I don't know if that is strong enough to go to the movie theater and have everybody understand where it's picking up. But I know that if that was a series on YouTube, that there are fans there to support it. So yeah, so I think that's basically like, you could do a lot of different things, but specifically with Never Hike Alone, I definitely want to explore that and go in both directions. I want to explore where Jason's been, but I want to mostly explore kind of where it's all going, and where does this all come to an end? Like, how does this end for Tommy, and how does this end for Tommy and Jason, and how does Kyle play a piece in that?
Awesome. Well, whatever you end up doing, dude, I'll be there to watch it. That's all I gotta say. Because I've been a big fan of what you did with Never Hike Alone, and any ideas all the ideas you just pitched me were awesome. So if you get to do any of that, I'll be there to watch it. So yeah, no problem. I guess as a final wrap up for this, because we've been going for 2.5 hours now for talking about Friday the 13th, which is pretty awesome. So I've had a blast. I'm glad you pitched this idea to me, because this was a lot of fun. I'd be gung-ho to do another video with you on another topic, because it was a good conversation. But
maybe when Child's Play comes out, I'll volunteer to be like, all right, let's talk.
Yes.
Yeah, we can debate the remake versus where the series is now going versus where the original series is going, and see what's the better option.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, my dad's actually in the chat. He says Never Hike Alone is awesome. I went to his house. This is a funny story. So my dad is not a fan of this series at all. He likes the remake. He has I think there's a couple of movies maybe where he has the nostalgic memories of going to see them with my uncle in the theater, but they're not a movie series that he's a big fan of. I went to his house maybe a month or so after I first saw Never Hike Alone, and we were just kind of bullshitting around, and I made him and my mom sit down and watch it, and we all watched Never Hike Alone together. My dad was like, damn, that was really good. And I actually got a Blu-ray copy for him as well. So I gave it to him as a Christmas present. I gave him the copy of Never Hike Alone. So he's a fan of what you've done too.
Well, I appreciate, and that's, I always got to stop and thank fans, because most of Never Hike Alone's popularities come because people keep sharing it. And that was my hope. That was like, when I made it, I was like, I want this to be something you pass on to another Friday the 13th fan, and be like, I got to show you something. And it's a nice surprise. I think for people that they just find out. There's still people just finding out about it. I still get emails about Blu-rays that have been long since sold out. And I don't know. I think you saw them. I'm going to cave. I'm going to do another round of Blu-rays, and we're trying to figure out, like, basically I'm going to Horror Hound this weekend. I'll be Horror Hound Cincinnati, walking around as Ghost Jason, and some other cosplay. And when I'm not doing that, I'm going to be sitting at my computer building the new Indiegogo for a second round of Blu-rays. And we're going to use that money to fund some new projects and do what we keep doing. Like, we started doing our, basically I've been doing this monthly donation to Penny Pines, just kind of putting money in as it goes, because we were still dealing with some of the costs. And if we might do a new pressing, I might just do the new pressing and use all the new stuff to donate it. But I figured the best way to do it is to spread it out throughout the year. And then if new kind of like fires come up and stuff like that, it's like, I noticed that as I was trying to raise money for certain things, like by the time we actually got the money and we're done, like, oh, that's already got all its money. So I just ended up giving more to Penny Pines. So as things come up, we're going to continually make those donations, but this would give us another kind of funding way to do it. And we obviously have the Pathosis project that we're working on, but there is I'll just put it out there. There's a new secret project going on at Washington Films that we're working on. That's not Never Hike Alone 2, but I think fans are going to dig it when they see what we're up to. We've been kind of working on some stuff behind the scenes for something we can unleash sooner than, because Never Hike Alone is going to take a long time. Logistics nightmare, money nightmare. I'm going to have to break a lot of rules to make it. And we want to pitch it to studios. So, but in the meantime, there's other things we can do with Ghost Jason. So we've been up to some things. So
awesome.
So keep your eyes out.
I was going to ask you for a tease, but you went ahead and teased me without it. So that's cool. So, well, like I already started saying, thank you so much for being on here. You're welcome anytime. But absolutely, when Child's Play comes out, I'm going to be doing a ton of videos, I'm sure, about this movie coming out and where the TV series is supposed to go and everything. So we'll definitely follow up on that. If you want to let everybody know any other place that they can find you, social media wise, or if you want to pitch Never Hike Alone really quick for those of us that haven't already seen it and haven't been convinced by me.
Yeah, if you haven't seen Never Hike Alone yet, go and watch it. We just crossed 750,000 views. We're climbing towards 1 million. We want to get there in the next couple months. It's kind of a big milestone for us. It's free on YouTube, youtube.com/wompstompfilms, WOMPSTOMPFILMS. And that's also the same at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You just put /wompstompfilms. You're going to find us. You're going to get updates on the new Indiegogo and the Blu-rays probably sometime next week. I just wrapped working on a show this Monday. So I've been super busy and I've been trying to do stuff in the background, but I finally have some free time. So I'm using this free time to kind of answer the question, deal with some Womp Stomp film business, get some projects up and running. So we're getting ready to make some new content for this year. And you definitely want to subscribe to our channels and check in, because you're going to see a lot more content coming through very soon.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, man. This was a lot of fun. Thank you to everybody in the chat. I know we didn't interact too much with the chat, but we had a ton of stuff to cover, not even getting into Q&As and stuff. But, you know, like I already gave Vince the open-ended invite, so maybe we'll do a Q&A one day or something like that. You'll see him around again, I'm sure. So if nothing else, for the Child's Play video. But thank you, everybody, for watching. Anybody watching this in the future, thank you for watching. That wasn't a part of the live stream, but this was a lot of fun. 2009 is still awesome. But
1980 is still a gem. Thank you.
There we go.
You created.
There we go. So, all right, everybody. Well, we're going to go ahead and cut it off now. Thank you, everybody that joined us. Everybody have a good night. And you can follow me in the video description below. All of my social media is down there. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Spreadshirt Store, Patreon, all that good stuff. And I'll have a link for Never Hike Alone downstairs as well. So if you're watching to this point and now you're sold on Never Hike Alone, just look down here. It's the quickest way to find it. So thanks, everybody.